with gratitude that we live and work on the unceded traditional territory of the Squamish Nation, whose people have been stewards of these lands and waters surrounding the Quellahem, Bowen Island. Welcome to the Bowen Island Municipality meeting of April 24th, 2023. Thank you for joining. I'm Andrew Leonard, the Mayor of Bowen Island Municipality and the chair of this meeting. As I do at the start of each meeting, I'd like to introduce the other elected officials here tonight, and I will start on my left with Councillor John Saunders. To his right is Councillor Tim Wake. To his right is Councillor Alison Morse. To my far right is Councillor Sue Ellen Fast, and to her left is Councillor Judy Getty. Councillor Jurgensen is still not with us, correct? Okay. Also joining us this evening are members of our professional staff who will be participating or presenting reports tonight. And as always, to my right, we have our Chief Administrative Officer, Liam Edwards, and to my left, our Corporate Officer, Sophie Insigna. This meeting is being recorded. So when members of the public speak during public comments or the question and answer period, your presence will be recorded in the permanent record, which is available at bowenislandmunicipality.ca, as well as live on our YouTube channel for thousands this evening by live stream. This council meeting, there's an official forum for the conducting of business of local government. We all love our homes. We're all passionate about what happens here. I'd encourage everyone to maintain a constructive and respectful tone during the meeting and to direct all comments during the public comment section, the question and answer period, to myself. The agenda, for those that may or may not have it, or if you're following online, is available at bowenislandmunicipality.ca, and that contains everything that we'll be discussing tonight, as well as all of the staff reports. That said, before looking for adoption of the agenda, I'll look to our corporate officer for late items this evening.
For our late items, we have item 8.1A, which is a letter from Don Schaefer regarding the Baylink presentation. 9.1, a new item from Graham Ritchie of Sun Coke House requesting a letter of support. And item 12.1, 23 letters from the public regarding the proposed regional parking camping at Cape Roger Curtis that have been received since Friday.
Thank you. So I'll look for a recommendation that council approve the agenda and late items for the April 24th, 2023 regular council meeting. So moved by Councillor Getty, seconded by Councillor Wake. Any discussion on the agenda? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand and say aye. 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 Carries unanimously. Moving on to item 2, public comments. How many public comments do we have with us this evening?
We have 7 tonight.
7? So by my math, we'll do 2 minutes and 15 seconds for each public comment. So folks that are coming up for public comments, the floor will be yours. You'll hear our wonderful super advanced timing device go off at 2 minutes. So that gives you 15 seconds really just to like round the corner and make your, what is it? Your closing remarks. That's what it is. So the first speaker that we have this evening.
We have Owen Plowman, and he's on Zoom.
Okay. Mr. Plowman, whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you loud and clear.
Thanks. I very much appreciate you making time to listen to me. Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, councillors. My points this evening are really related. There are 2 points I want to make. They're really related to the same thing, which is to ask you to postpone reading of the rezoning bylaw in connection with the Metro Vancouver application. My first point is that at the meeting of September 27th, 21, Council passed resolution number 21-350, which directed staff to amend our OCP to designate the CRC lands as a development permit area to protect the natural environment, ecosystems, and biological diversity there. That resolution, it turns out, is still on the books, and the amendment to the current OCP was never put in place. It's critical that the amendment be made and the development permit guidelines be inserted into the current OCP before proceeding to first reading of the rezoning bylaw, which you've got on the agenda for tonight's meeting. Otherwise, the legal standing of any development permit application guidelines related to Cape Roger Curtis may be called into question in the future. And if that's not clear to everybody, then I urge you to obtain legal advice on the matter. My second point is that the draft bylaw for rezoning was only issued last Friday, and the public hasn't had a reasonable period to review that draft and provide you with feedback. Given the current lack of urgency to proceed to first readings, I would ask you to allow more time to pass for public comments before you consider the bylaw for first reading, and to postpone that first reading to a later date. That's all. Thank you very much. By the way, I should say that I'm speaking both as a private citizen and as president of the Bowen Island Conservancy tonight. Thanks a lot.
Here, here.
Thank you very much, Mr. Clement.
David Hockey.
Evening, Mayor, Council. I'm sad. I hurt my back and I don't want to sit down. So I'm here really to thank you very much for the process that you followed. I don't agree with Mr. Plowman. I actually like the bylaw, and I'm going to have a couple of comments about that. But I really feel that you've taken great care to listen to the community and then to move forward, to work with Metro Vancouver as well as you could, and to move forward appropriately. So I'm very pleased to see the agreement with Metro Vancouver, and very pleased to see the bylaw here today. I recognize that it's going to get tough. I just had a nice conversation outside with some folks from Tunstall Bay who have some serious issues they want to raise, and I absolutely support that. So we need to have lots more conversations. We just have to make sure that we do so in a tone that involves listening and trying to find ways to find solutions to the issues that people raise. And so I'm looking forward to a continued discussion. On the bylaw, I found a typo. I'm sure Allison's found it. I'll let you go looking for it. I particularly like the phasing based on performance. And why I feel that we don't need to wait, because Daniel's already said in his report that he's suggesting that we don't send it out to our committees until we've done more work on figuring out what that phasing would look like, because that's what people would really have a chance to. That would be really important for people to have a chance to look at that and think about that. So I thought that was well done. I appreciated the work that was done, and good luck, and keep working hard on this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Hocking.
Sherry Ulrich.
Mayor and Council. I can't actually see you because I have my reading glasses on.
I'm Ms. Lark.
I have already sent you my words of support and praise for your leadership in these unprecedented, challenging early days of your council term, and for supporting a very positive decision for the future of Cape Roger Curtis and for Bowen Island. So I probably don't need to repeat that, although I just did. I have told many people in my life that if I ever say I want to run for council, that they're to slap me upside the head. I do want to emphasize that the responsive dissent it's not a given that it will happen. Wait a minute. I want to emphasize that the responsive dissent is not related to it being a given that what's going to happen going forward, but rather a response to the fear of the worst case scenario. Though we are a long way from being one and the same, we are all very sympathetic to valid concerns, which ironically is why I'm so encouraged, because there's so much motivation to find solutions. We're in a strong position to manage the evolution of this planning. The municipal, you know who you are, has a remarkably skilled staff and CAO, an intelligent and principled council, and well-proven supportive partner in Metro Vancouver, which is already very engaged with the island and highly motivated for the presence of this park and campground to have a very positive impact on Bowen Island and beyond. For some reason, we're inclined to have a default mistrust of the bigger guy. And whether it's this council or Metro Vancouver or beyond, these bodies are all made up of people like us, people with lives and families who are doing their best to serve their communities and want and deserve to be trusted and treated with respect. So I would love to turn the tide to faith in all of our abilities and intentions to ensure that this park and campground is a win-win for our community, both on and off island. And we are very grateful to Council for all your hard work on the project so far. Thank you very much.
Tim Rhodes.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Here we are again, deja vu all over again. Last time the community divided over a park, it came with the promise of diverse housing, free service lots for affordable housing, and $7 million, all of which we still need today. This park comes with a very significant and unidentified infrastructure and maintenance costs outside of the park. The disruption of a neighborhood community, and probably camping, none of which we need. Council has a letter I wrote on the weekend, one of the 23 letters that came to you on the weekend. I'm sure you read them all very closely, where I tried to provide as comprehensive a list as possible of many of the issues to be addressed and costed and paid for. It's the only way we're going to truly understand the financial cost of the impact of this park on our infrastructure, and the only tool council will have to negotiate the appropriate compensation from Metro for the infrastructure upgrades and ongoing maintenance. I have asked for independent reports, not because I lack faith in Metro, but because trust but not verify is the prudent approach here. In my letter, I suggested that these reports would cost the municipality thousands of dollars. This was not correct. The reports will cost thousands of dollars, but the proponent should foot the bill. This is not a municipal initiative, it is a proponent's initiative. I urge you to have all this information in hand before proceeding to second reading. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rhodes. And good to see you in chambers again.
Cam Rolfe.
Hi, Mayor and Council. Cameron Rolfe. I'm a property owner at 1355 West Side Road. I'm speaking with respect to a letter which was sent to Mayor and Council recently regarding my proposed mini storage facility at that address. I've attended previous council meetings and this item has come up. I think it was adjudicated at that time and also in my favor. I understand my neighbors are still not satisfied with that result. I believe that my application is in compliance with the zoning. It has been carefully checked by staff, and I believe I was told also by legal counsel. And I think that there isn't much more to be said about it. I am thankful for your time, and I'm here to answer any questions if any arise. I'll keep it short. Thank you.
Margaret Underhill.
I'll stand too. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Margaret Underhill. My husband and I are two of the signatures on the letter about 1355 West Side Road. I'd just like to reiterate our strong feelings about this. While we understand the bylaws that affect this kind of thing, there's also a lot of points that we feel are ambiguous and unclear, and items such as OCP policies that would affect this kind of thing that have not been fully taken into account. So here we are, and we will leave the matter with you, and we will continue to express our opinions as and when necessary. Thank you.
Thank you.
And finally, Liz Watson.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I used to be a teacher, so I can project really well. I'm glad to be here tonight, and I just want to say I'm here on behalf of a huge group of people from White Sails, Pencil Bay, and the Cape. We are very, very concerned about the park out at the Cape. We have a variety of concerns that we feel we haven't really voiced, and we don't feel we've been heard. So when that happens, people start to get really upset. And so we're just really wanting to make sure that there's an opportunity for our concerns to be heard. And what we're wanting to do is We need creative, positive solutions that enhance the quality of life for all Bowen Islanders. And, this park can be a gift. It can be an opportunity for us. But unless, these issues are solved, the many issues are solved, it's not going to be a gift or an opportunity for Islanders, and especially people on White Hills, where it's going to affect most. So we are planning to get together and make our presence known. We are planning to meet with you at next council meeting as a delegation. We'll be bringing some information forward to you, research that has been done in the past that we'd like to offer to you. And then we are also hoping to invite you to an open house, kind of like a town hall meeting in Tunstall Bay, where we get as many people as possible there to ask you our questions and hear our concerns, and hopefully hear some creative solutions from you, because right now we're working in this vacuum and we're just getting more and more worried. So on behalf of all of us, and there are many of us, thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. And when residents get together and coordinate and come and show passion for an issue, and particularly for themselves in really positive ways and constructive ways, I think there's the opportunity to work together. So I welcome that invitation. I would commit on my own behalf to attend. So thank you.
Great. As many as we can here.
That concludes the public comment portion. Moving on to item 3, adoption of the consent agenda. Are there councillors who would like to pull items from the consent agenda this evening? You, Councillor Giddy?
In addition, if we could pull some of the correspondence, 12.5, 12.9.
Or can't hear you.
Right, I'm hearing 12.5,
12.9,
12.9,
12.12, and 12.13.
12.13.
Just for referrals.
Any other councillors who would like to pull items from the consent agenda? I'd like to pull nearest pools letter from 12.2.
Or did you say 12.2?
12.2, there's a whole stack of letters, but
I think Heather's hotspot.
story.
That's the late.
I'm looking at the, not 12.2, 12.1, sorry.
Okay.
All right, so we'll start with 12.1. The reason I wanted to pull this one is that it speaks to one of the public comments that we had earlier regarding OCP amendments that are already in progress. And I just wanted to identify 4 councillors who haven't had the opportunity to take a look at it and to consider it. The important part to note here is that council did resolve to move forward with an OCP amendment in the last term regarding to development permit areas for Cape Roger Curtis. And I believe that it's still open. I think that we'll probably handle the discussion of this one, during the first reading of the bylaw, but I just wanted to flag it for councilors' attention if they wanted to read it for further information. So with that, I'll look for a motion to receive nearest pools letter from 12.1. So moved by Councillor Getty, seconded by Councillor Wake. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor of the motion to receive? Your hand say aye. Aye, that carries. I will turn it over to Councillor Getty for item 12.5.
12.5 is a letter that Anton Van Walraven has written about Home Fiber's recent amendments. And I don't know if this has been discussed with the Environmental Committee, but it's about 5 pages of solid detail that sounds pretty good. I'm not sure if the committee has had a chance to look at it, but I think that it might be something that I think it should be referred to them, and we can get some sort of a feedback in terms of if we want to take additional steps to support that letter.
Councillor Fast?
Thank you. I don't think this particular issue has been referred to the ECAC, the Environment and Climate Action Committee yet, partly because the timeline was so short the last time we saw it, that there wasn't time to refer it. And I think, though, that I'd be happy to. I think, sorry, I can't find it in here, but I think the time is, the timeline for that is passed. But I do know that council has sent a number of letters regarding wood fibers roadmap to net zero, and I'd be happy to, let's refer it to ECAC if you like. Because I mean, now there's a lot of activity on the part of some community groups and also the biosphere region writing letters because the proposal has been I mean, it involves a pipeline and all kinds of different components that I'm not aware of all of them. But even the internet fiber connection to Bowen might have a bearing on it. So I can speak to that when we get to that part of the agenda. But we did have I think the last time we had a demonstration in front of Municipal Hall was in the fall before the election. So it's an ongoing thing, and we do have some letters that have been sent. And if you'd like, I could also, or we could ask Carla for a little report on what council has done so far, or I can send around the emails and things.
Okay. So looking forward.
Did you want more information?
Yes, is that, so it sounds like a motion to refer to the Environment and Climate Action Advisory Committee.
Thank you.
So moved by Councillor Getty.
Thank you.
Second by Councillor Fast. Any discussion on this one? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carries. Councillor Getty for 12.9.
So Pat Grail has written a letter about forest practice and tree cutting. And this is a topic that has come up with the Islands Trust with respect to them changing their position with respect to asking the province for jurisdiction over tree cutting. But I think that it is something that is not a development issue here. It is a logging, what do you call it, with the provincial agency that is reopening, looking at all of the forests. So this has come up again. I think that this also needs to be referred to, I believe, the Climate Action Committee.
Environment and Climate Action.
Okay.
Okay.
But I believe that from the sounds of what's happening in the logging district, that we might have to get up to speed on this one. This letter is a good introduction.
Okay. So I
A
think
motion to refer this letter to the Environment and Climate Action Committee.
So moved, seconded by Councillor Fast. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
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 Carries. Thank you, Councillor. Carries unanimously. Nice to hear your voice, Councillor Jurgensen.
Currently unmuted. Likewise.
Moving on to item 12.12. So the letter Bill Granger, re-DCC income. Councillor Getty.
All right.
or is that the other one?
This is something that has sort of been skirted around for many different reasons in terms of development cost charges. So whether this should be more accurately a referral to staff to respond or to the finance committee. But I think it's an idea that we've been waiting for a very long time, and that it's something that we need to get up to speed on. And Mr. Granger's points in terms of it being a source of potentially a source of income, that I think we need to look at that very seriously. So I'm not sure which would be the most appropriate.
Perhaps I'll look to staff to respond on the DCC issue. I know it's been talked about.
Yeah, it's, we did receive council direction to work on a DCC bylaw for the Snug Cove sewer as the primary piece of work. And it certainly can be expanded to consider DCCs for all water systems as well as roads. Really it just comes down to a capacity issue. So there's many things that council and previous councils like direct staff to do, but staff is quite limited in its capacity to complete all the things that council may wish staff to do. And so this is on the work plan for this current year to get the DCC bylaw for the wastewater treatment plant complete, or the Snug Cove wastewater service area. And I think that once that DCC is complete, that would be a good roadmap to then consider expansion to include other assets like roads.
Councillor Getty to respond.
Would it help to have it referred to the finance committee? Would that assist staff?
I don't know. I mean, we've talked about it at the finance committee several times. It really is just a matter of finding time in busy days to actually draft bylaw. A critical element of any DCC bylaw is engagement with the impacted development community. And so I have been talking informally with some of the key developers in the Snug Cove service area about that prospective DCC bylaw coming forward. But ultimately, we need to have a draft in place and potential charges and have a formal meeting engagement with all of the developers that would be impacted and then bring that back to council for consideration. And so I don't think that the Finance Advisory Committee would necessarily be able to do anything more other than encourage staff to continue to try to advance it.
Councillor Fast.
Thank you. I wonder if, it seems to me there've been a number of good reports from planning staff, and I wonder if a couple of the more recent ones could be circulated to council so that you can see some of the work that has been done on this so far.
I don't know that any work has been done.
Okay. I might be thinking about a different one.
So
we had a very couple of detailed reports and engaged Urban Systems on how to fund development. And they compared latecomer agreements and DCCs and a variety of different things and made some recommendations. So, and it explains what the steps and things you have to go through.
Anyway, I just encourage.
So I got that, I can dig it up.
Okay.
I think it's an important element for consideration. So if we need a reminder of the background that already exists, then I think it would be helpful for somehow or other to have some sort of action step.
this was identified, I believe, in one of council's last meetings as one of, I think it was 5 deliverables that staff would be working on this year that are financially related, along with the capital levy policy for supporting infrastructure that may have beneficial uses to the broader island community outside the local service area, along with a few other work items. And so council just recently passed a resolution in motion to get staff to direct staff to bring that forward. So happy to dig out older reports from before I was here to share with staff or to share with council for way of background, but we've been directed pretty clearly by council to undertake the work. Again, it just comes back to capacity and finding the time to get it done.
Okay.
I'll move receipt of the letter for information.
So move to receive the letter. Seconded by Councillor Fast. The only discussion I'll add on this one is that, so there's 2 pieces in this meeting already that's come up so far around loops to close. One is around that OCP amendment. This is around DCCs. was having a conversation with the CAO on how to identify these, given that part of our strategic plan that we just adopted was finishing what's already been started. So perhaps we might have a committee of the whole in the coming months, not in an immediate way, but once the dust settles from some of the things that we have on our plates, to consolidate resolutions and pieces of work that are already out there so that we can prioritize them and see where the capacity lies and really what it is that we want to target moving forward. Any further discussion on this one before we receive? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Carries unanimously. Moving on to item 12.13, which is David Watt regarding the 7 neighboring properties opposing industrial use on West Side Road. Councilor Getty.
I'm not sure what to do about this. There's two opposing interests, and the CAM has received some sort of an indication that, and council received an indication that this has been discussed with staff, and that you discussed it with council, and that there were no grounds for the argument that has been made by the neighbors. Nevertheless, the neighbors are concerned, and I think from my reading of the letters that there's at least some potential argument. I'm not sure how we do problem solving and resolution around this, and it hasn't gone away, it hasn't settled. And I think that there's something that needs to shift in terms of us having a more open discussion so that it's, yes, staff have made a decision and staff have relayed that decision, but we've still got a community and a part of the island that's resisting, and it's creating if it's a long-term use of that property, that's contemplated, which it is, then there's been a sale of the land, so it's not an equestrian center anymore. And it's something that I think somehow or other we have to help that neighborhood deal with this kind of these kinds of issues. It's come up at my open house, I think maybe 3 times, and there's more and more people that show up and more people that are concerned, and there's now however many signatures to this letter, and I think that it's, for both sides, it's something that needs to be resolved, and I don't know that the parties are able to do it themselves. Mm-hmm. So I'm not sure if it's a referral or it's, figuring out some process that we can help, if it's possible to help.
Maybe I'll look for a comment to staff, either from planning or our CAO, where that project is.
So the project is a land use application for an applicable use in accordance with the land use bylaw and the OCP. And so the land use application really is not in question. It's the development permit requirements and the normal building permit requirements that would be applied to any development that was an allowable use within the zone identified in the land use bylaw. And so because the property is situated in a development permit area, the owner is required to seek a development permit and a permit approval. And the owner did just that, and it complied with all of the requirements as stated, and met the test of the development permit approval process, which was granted several weeks ago. I can't remember exactly when. And now the property owner would be seeking a building permit to advance the project to the actual construction phase or the bringing in of the mini storage containers. And I believe that's in process, and just making sure that the allowable square footage for lot coverage is in accordance with the lot size. And once that has been resolved, then the building permit would be issued and the applicant and property owner would be able to carry forward with the project. So that's where the project currently stands. And we had our legal counsel review it several times for absolute clarity on both the land use in relation to the land use bylaw and the OCP, and as well as in relation to the building permit and the allowable or lot coverage. So we've been applying significant due diligence, more, I kind of hesitate to say more than normal, because I don't want anybody to think that we provide less due diligence on certain things, but we've been applying really significant due diligence to this particular application. And it's not something that staff have taken lightly, and we've certainly taken consideration and heard the concerns of the neighborhood. However, given that it is an allowable use, it meets all the tests for approval.
Any further discussion? I suppose just coming back to Councillor Getty's original point around this being, because this won't in this term be the last issue that we see in this neighborhood. There was a cidery that went in there under a temporary use permit that this council will be dealing with again in that neighborhood. We're looking at this project as well. So I'm curious if there is, and maybe there isn't at this time, or maybe it's something that we need to give some thought to, is what is the role of the municipality in addressing some of the community concerns for use in the neighborhood that is really changing the face of that neighborhood in significant ways.
I would argue that there are two very different applications. One is a use that is prescribed as legitimate within the land use bylaw and the OCP, and the other is a use that is not identified within the land use bylaw and the OCP, hence it's requiring a rezoning. Well, it currently has a temporary use permit to be allowed to operate because it doesn't comply. And the previous council saw fit to support that application for a temporary use permit and approved it. And, one interesting question would be to canvass the neighborhood about the impacts of that particular application and to actually try to gauge and see what the impact of that decision has been as that comes forward for a rezoning. Whereas this other application for the mini storage is an allowable use. And so it's already established within our governing bylaws for the community. So I think they're quite different.
Maybe at this point, what I would do, because it's a tricky issue, and I think it's an issue that's going to affect us into the future. I mean, the purposes of the land use bylaw are not, and I would invite both the neighborhood as well as the proponent of the development permit application to get in touch with me, and let's see where things are at. I would really like to understand the issue a bit more, and to Councillor Getty's point, I think there is a role that the municipality has in being able to constructively address some of these changing uses in neighborhoods. So Councillor Getty, it was your item to pull. I don't know if there's a specific course of action you'd like to take, or if there's a motion that you have.
Well, I'm stumped in terms of what the options might be. And I hear from the CAO that he's ticked off all the boxes that he's interested in looking at. And I'm not sure that it was answering the question that I raised in terms of, there's differences of opinion in terms of the definition of mini storage. There's differences of opinion in terms of, whether or not there's sufficient access, or the access is too too close to housing or something, but, and whether or not there's any regulation of, what is inside the storage and whether or not that creates any kind of hazards. And, as I understand, I think there's some issues that it would be, I think those are reasonable questions, and that when those are raised, whether there's due diligence in terms of it fits the definition of mini storage that's in the bylaw, then, what exactly does that mean? We've never really tested that. And how that got in, and what it meant when it was put into the bylaw, and what it means now in light of this particular example, is something that, yes, it, can go through and in one lane and take certain steps and get approval, and the other way of looking at it is that it's new and it's different and it's changing, and it's creating problems for a significant part of the community. At least one
significant?
area. Well, one area.
Okay,
Is that-
significant part of the neighborhood, perhaps. I don't know about the island, but
Yeah.
if I may, Chair, the definition of mini storage is defined pretty clearly, and it meets the test of that definition. And what may or may not be stored in that mini storage is regulated, and so there are some restrictions about what can and cannot be stored. And so I don't know. In my view, I don't see any confusion or ambiguity in terms of what is defined as mini storage versus large commercial storage. This meets the test of mini storage, and it's pretty clear to me. So I'm happy to discuss that in more detail with the councillor if desired. But it's fairly clearly laid out.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Wig.
It seems to me this is in part a problem of communication. And I don't know that the complainants have been given any kind of adequate listening exercise by anyone who. So I guess what I'm wondering here is if there's an opportunity for someone, and maybe somebody objective other than staff, to review and just do the explaining, like what is the nature of the complaint exactly? I mean, Councillor Geddes mentioned a few things. Now you've answered that. That kind of conversation could, I think, maybe go a long way so at least that both the complainant and the applicant felt heard.
Councillor Past?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say, I think our staff are objective. There are professional staff who are, that's their job, is to be objective. We're the political folks who listen to the community and weigh in on decisions that come to this table. I think my experience with development permits is that this is something that this council has chosen to delegate to staff because it's a list of very specific conditions. And if they're met, it gets approved, and that's our local bylaw. And so I think, and I'm satisfied that that's been happening in this case. Maybe others are not, but it's council could choose to take these decisions at this table, but which is something I've seen on some other islands. But it gets into all this murky world of what if they've met the conditions, then you need to approve the permit. It's completely different. Anyway, I just want to say we delegated these decisions to staff, and I think they're being objective. And I don't have an issue, but I agree it might be something to do with communication and what's the difference between a development permit and a rezoning, and those kinds of questions might be helpful to people.
Thank you, Chair. I first want to agree with Councillor Pat's comment that my experience so far is that staff is extremely objective with these things. And I think on something like this, we're kind of weighing different things. I think it's incumbent on us as a council and on staff to be agnostic to the result. Either we can do this or we can't. And I appreciate the need to hear everybody does need to be heard and everything. If it is in fact straightforward, as it appears to be, that this does meet the test, we're going to get into some pretty deep water if we start going down the road of, well, yeah, it meets the test, but maybe not, or maybe because we want to hear people and let them be heard, we should change our minds on this. I don't want to go down. I'm not necessarily suggesting somebody's saying we should go down that road. I know I certainly don't want to. I think as I said, I think we need to be agnostic to the result in the sense of what does the law tell us, or the law in this case tell us needs to be done and what's legal and what isn't. Thanks.
And people don't matter.
I'd like to respond to that. And then in fact, people do matter, and they matter a lot to everybody here. And that's why we're trying to work through these things.
Councillor Getty?
There was a discussion 2 or 3 meetings ago about something else that was delegated to staff and whether or not that was going to be revisited. And that was something that was going to be brought back. I can't remember the details now. Are we going to go?
There's a little bell ringing. I can't quite recall what it is. It was, I think it was a new.
Okay, and maybe that's the issue. When something becomes difficult, that there's an opportunity to have it referred to a decision that is dotting the i's and crossing the t's and following the rules, but there's still some dissension, that there's an opportunity to bring it to council.
I'm going to let the CAO respond, and then for the sake of timing on our agenda, we're going to look to move on.
I fully welcome that kind of discussion and exploration of how and when delegated authority is authorized, and how and when council may or may not intervene. And I would just be really cautious about how that's utilized, because it can be used quite negatively. And all of a sudden we could find ourselves in a very divisive relationship between council staff and the community that see a crack in a process, and the community start to utilize that to their best advantage. So I totally welcome and understand the concerns, and I think it's good for us to explore this and discuss it and see how it could be better. But I just also caution how we
Okay. Thank you for the discussion on this. I mean, I think it identifies that there are cracks in the process, and that you ultimately need to look at our official community plan and the way that we're using land on this island, as well as our land use bylaw. And with that, I'll look for a motion to receive the letter.
So moved.
Moved by Councillor Morris, seconded by Councillor Getty. Any discussion on this? Seeing none, all in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That's carried unanimously. That concludes the consent agenda. Moving on to item 5, delegations. 5.1, we have Christina Owen and Lisa Romero from Baylink Connected Coast Project for a presentation. Thank you, Ms. Owen and Ms. Romero, for being here this evening. You have 15 minutes, and we can see you. Speak to test to see if we can hear you. That would be appreciated.
Good evening. Thank you for having us, Mayor and Council.
Thank you. You're coming through loud and clear.
Good. Excellent. Thank you very much for having us. And we have a presentation, a few slides today we wanted to go through and hear your comments on the Connected Coast Project funded landing on the island. Go ahead, Christina, you can. Wanted to go through here, the information on the project, the funded connection to the island, and next steps. The Connected Coast project has been funded by both federal and provincial government, as well as funding put in from the two partners, which are the Strathcona Regional District, as well as City West. City West is a telecommunications company based out of Prince Rupert, and they're fully owned by the City of Prince Rupert. So they've teamed up to deliver an internet service project all along the coast of BC, because they both had interests in providing this service in different areas. We're able to secure this funding. The 3,400 kilometers of cable will connect approximately 139 communities along the coast. In addition, Natural Resources Canada and the Coast Guard have put in funding for connections to lighthouses and to a new earthquake early warning system. So the system will allow residents in rural remote communities to access essential services, such as education, health, and e-commerce. There are a number of locations being connected where they don't have any internet, either fiber or coaxial that would have been put in years ago. In addition to that, there are some communities where there are connections being made for redundancy and for options for communities to have other open services for ISPs other than what they might be provided. So that would be Bowen Island. I know there's a cable from TELUS to Bowen Island, but this offers another opportunity that the community or other companies can access internet through as they see fit. Because the project is so extensive geographically, what we have done is gone through the sections, or what we call blocks, of the project to look at planning for potential landing areas within those sites that are funded. We've done engagement with communities and First Nations and a number of others we'll get to here. We go through the permitting process and then the building there. So for the connection we'll get to another slide here, for connection to Bowen Bay, it does require tenure through the provincial government as one of those approvals there. So overall for the project, we've engaged with about 70 First Nations, and we do receive letters of support from those nations where we're connecting to their communities. Engaged a number of regional districts, municipalities, local communities, tenure holders, Pacific Pilotage Authority, BC Coast Pilots, a number of fishing associations, local harbor authorities, and the Council of BC Yacht Club. So through this input as we're planning, we've received different guidance on where are areas where folks would like to see this cable land and would not like to see the cable routing to avoid any or minimize potentials for snags with fishing gear and anchorage, for example. Okay, next slide there. I'll pass this over to you, Christina.
Thanks, Lisa. So just wanted to quickly introduce myself. My name is Christina. I'm with Baylink Networks. Baylink is the contractor for Connected Coast. So what's really special about our cable is it's a very small, dense cable. It's only 13.5 millimeters by 6.3 millimeters. Lisa's holding an example there. So that's how small our cable is. At this point, most of Vancouver to Prince Rupert are installed. And as we go along, we have notice to mariners, and as soon as our cable is installed, it gets added to the marine charts. And we make all of our as-built files available on the Connected Coast website. So this is available for anyone to download and be of where the cables are, in addition to being uploaded to CHS charts. The cable will break at 44,000 kilograms force, and we do have a call-in number for mariners in case there's a snag. We have redundancy built into most of the cable route, which means if it's damaged, we will still be able to keep our network going. And because we splice in smaller sections, 10 kilometers, we're able to do quick repairs. So all throughout the Vancouver Island, we have a variety of different types of landing sites. And in each of these sites, we work around sensitive habitats. In areas where it's more rough, for example, some of our Coast Guard locations, the terrain is quite rocky. We have a protective cast iron split pipe that we place over for protection. Whenever possible, we install in soft substrates. We will be connecting to a vault and then a cabinet for distribution. For Bowen Bay, we are only proposing a vault at this landing. We go through extensive planning to avoid important habitats where possible and implement mitigation and monitoring at all of our landings. So the top left photo there is a photo of what the completed vault would look like once installed at Bowen Bay. So this is our updated engineering drawing. This installation is funded, completely funded and intended to provide increased diversity and redundancy to the existing network. A license of occupation application has been submitted to the province, which ends at the district lot boundary, and past the district lot boundary is we will be needing approval from Bowen Bay before proceeding with this installation. As Lisa noted earlier, this network is open access, so other providers can use this to diversify their network. And this project will provide telecom resiliency, competition, and choice. Our team recently completed a site visit at Bowen Bay this last week. Our operations manager met with Bowen Island municipality staff to look at the location of the proposed cable. Based on this site visit and upon staff recommendation, we are shifting the landing location slightly to better serve the community. So we will be submitting updated drawings as well. The proposed location that we have suggested is an established cable landing site. As seen in this photo, there's a TELUS cable coming in here as well. We will be going through the full permitting and engineering review required, and part of that will be submitting the updated drawings. Once we have executed the permitting required for this landing, we will be able to move forward and execute our final tenure with the province. So the next steps we would need before going forward with this section of the project, we would need approval of the landing location. We would need confirmation of engineering review with the staff, and then we would also need to finalize an encroachment agreement for this proposed landing. And
thank you.
No problem.
And I'll look to the floor and the councillors. Any questions? Councillor Morse.
I'm still a bit confused. Where is the cable? I've got a couple of questions. So where's the cable coming from that's going to land here?
So this cable will be connected. The cable that's going here will be coming from Keats Island before connecting to Bowen Bay, and then the cable at Bowen Bay will be connected to our data center in Vancouver.
So there's no plans for running cable anywhere else on Bowen?
The Connected Coast is just designed to install the backbone of the network. So our goal is to install the cable all around Vancouver Island. With the installation of a vault there, ISP providers would be able to access the vault and further build out.
Or it could be used to connect into existing infrastructure that's on the island for redundancy purposes, if that's of interest.
For somebody to use it, they're going to have to run fiber optic from it.
Yeah, or the existing fiber system on the island or coaxial can be connected into that. TELUS is obviously operating there, so it's something they could look at adding to their system if they're interested, or if there's another provider that was interested in connecting in. We've worked with a number of communities that don't have this level of service, and they've been interested in partnering with City West and creating an ISP in some cases, and they've partnered and applied for funding and then done the fiber to the home build out. So that's something that's been being done in some of those communities with no current fiber to the home.
And the other concern, I guess, is you talk about cables hanging, Bowen Bay, being as you were here in the wintertime, but you would have seen a bunch of mooring buoys, but there's boats anchor and moor there all the time.
Yep, that's right. We are aware of that. I think there was an earlier site visit. I'm not sure when that was. It was last year sometime, the first one. And we have worked with Transport Canada as well. I've noted the Council of BC Yacht Club, so we're aware of that. Those boats in there. This is a location where there is a cable already. That's something that we do look for and try to stay close to when we're designing these landings. We looked at a number of options on the island here. This was one that the boaters had put forward when we talked to them. And we've gone through as well the permitting process with Transport Canada under the Navigable Waters Act for that line really from Bowen Bay into Vancouver. The reason that section needed that level of approval is because the cable on the Vancouver side is actually going into Port of Vancouver seabed. And so that was a requirement there. And another signage up there now, and I don't know if we would need to put our own signage up or can use that one. That's something we can confirm with Transport Canada, but it's something that so those boaters are aware that there are cables out there.
Thank you. Any further questions, Councillor Morse?
So you're actually running a cable from somewhere in Vancouver. How close is it going to be to the shore as it goes across along the south side to get to Bowen Bay?
Let me see if I can share my screen here.
Map's really hard to read. You had in your presentation.
Exactly. If you can see this. Are you able to see that image there? This is the routing coming from Vancouver around to Bowen Bay. And then to the north to Keats, it's the routing there.
So it is going to leave from Bowen Bay and go somewhere else?
Yep, to Keats. So Keats is one of those islands where they're actually going to be built out from the landing to fiber to the home. So that's been funded as well as Gambier. So those funding announcements, I think, were made in the fall there.
So to run to Keats, do you need a landing on Bowen?
It's not required. It was something that the provincial and federal governments were able to fund, interested in funding for this redundancy.
Thank you.
Councillor Fast?
Thank you. I think you've answered most of my questions through your presentation and answering Councillor Morse's questions. I'm interested in the talking about the BC Pilotage Authority and emergency services. By having this connection here, would this enable vessels to better maneuver through increasing winter storms and things like this? Or would it help Bowen's emergency capacity with cell towers and communications in the future?
It's certainly able to do that with connection out from this point. As I noted, we're connecting to a number of lighthouses on the coast, so quite some very remote ones. And that's able to help with emergency services there. There are also a few landings within lighthouses and small communities within parks, BC Parks waters, and they're interested in this ability to be able to have increased response with this other option of internet connection rather than just the radios or other options there. The pilots have asked us about that, particularly in areas like exiting LNG Canada, past Kitimat, when they're quite remote, and they've been asked to, as part of some of the commitments for environmental assessments, to provide information into government agencies, and so they're interested as well in hearing if at these lighthouses or other communities, if we can build in some form of communication for them. So that's something that's certainly an option there for the future.
Thank you very much. I'm just asking because we have a proposed LNG terminal at the end of Howe Sound, which is narrow and difficult to navigate in high winds.
Yes.
So thank you very much.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you, Councillor Fast. Councillor Saunders.
Thank you, through the chair. It's pretty straightforward what you're saying here to me. You want to land fiber at Bowen Bay and then you're walking away. You're not walking away. That's what your project is, the land fiber at Bowen Bay. Any use of that after, if any last mile or any other use of that would be on ISPs or other agencies to take advantage of. My question would be then, have you received any interest from any potential ISPs, or have you negotiated with anybody, or is it just, well, here it is, somebody come and use it if they choose to?
For the Bowen Island, we haven't heard interest yet. I can check back with those who are getting all the interest and working on those connections, but that's not something I'm aware of there for a build out. I did note that for Keats and Gambier that was of interest, so those have proceeded, and there are for some funded builds there.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Saunders. Any further questions? Thank you very much for being here this evening and presenting. I know that we do have, this is an item on our agenda that our Director of Engineering will be presenting on as well. So I'll look for a motion to receive the delegation. So moved by Councillor Fast, seconded by Councillor Saunders. Any discussion? All in favor, raise your hand and say aye. Aye. Carries unanimous. Thank you again for being here.
Okay, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks for having us.
Item 6, no business arising from the minutes. Item 7, bylaws 7.1, Bowen Island Municipality Official Community Plan, bylaw number 282, 2010 amendment bylaw number 608, 2023, and Bowen Island Municipality Land Use Bylaw 57, 2002 amendment bylaw number 609, consideration of first reading. I will turn this over to Daniel Martin, our Manager of Planning. For this item, knowing that we have two Metro Vancouver representatives in the audience, perhaps Mr. Redpath and Mr. Patrick will ask you to sit here with our Manager of Planning, just our Manager of Environment, in case there are any questions from Metro Vancouver.
We appreciate the leg room.
So thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Council. So as the Mayor had said, I'm here discussing the application for amendments to the OCP and land use bylaw for Metro Vancouver. And so I'll just walk you through this sort of presentation. So at the April 11th meeting, Council directed staff to bring a report to the April 24th meeting with draft bylaws for the OCP land use bylaw to permit the Metro Vancouver proposal for a retail park at Cape Roger Curtis with overnight use for up to 100 campsites. and to bring in any updates on responses to referrals made in the February 27th council meeting. So I'm going to I have a couple slides to talk through each of the bylaws. So first, bylaw 608 is the amendment. And this is in part repeating what's in the staff report as well, but this bylaw would amend the OCP map in Schedule B, the present and future land use designations, changing the properties in this application, the 24 10-acre lots in the application to the regional park designation, and changing the Crippen Regional Park designation to a more generic Regional Park 1. So our OCP currently has land use designation, so we have one designation for municipal parks, with the Crippen Regional Park designation, a designation for the provincial park at Apodaca, a designation for the Crown lands, and a designation for the Islands Trust Conservancy reserves. And so this would be in keeping with having that one designation for the regional parks. The bylaw would then add an objective and policy to the OCP section on Cape Roger Curtis lands. So emphasizing the permission for a regional park at Cape Roger Curtis to have camping. So objective 69 to support the creation of a regional park at Cape Roger Curtis that may include supervised overnight camping. And then policy 55, going into more details, so it may include a mixture of supervised overnight campsites, including group campsites, vehicular campsites, not including recreational vehicles or trailers, walk or biking campsites, trails, education programs, interpretive signage, and accessory building structures. And I just want to flag too to thank the mayor for catching that the staff report had a slightly earlier version of these policies than what is found actually in the bylaw. So we received edits late on Friday, just before publication. So the staff report wording is slightly different than the wording in the bylaw. So in particular, you'll see policy 155 has that not including recreation vehicles and trailers. That was still a late change to emphasize that vehicular campsite doesn't include RVs or trailers. And then the bylaw would also add policy 190. So this is the section about tourist management in the OCP, saying that there be no, that there can be vehicular campsites in a regional park. So campsites may be permitted in regional parks, accessed by backpackers, bicyclists, private motor vehicles, being recreational vehicles or trailers. And then the same language about connected to a trail network designed to minimize impacts. And this is what I've had questions from councillors about this policy in particular, and about worried about unintended consequences of allowing it in other regional parks. And so I would suggest council could amend the policy to say may be permitted in regional parks at Cape Roger Curtis, or words to that effect if that's a concern council has. And then bylaw 609 would be the land use bylaw amendment. So the bylaw would place the subject properties into the passive park P1 zone for all those 24 properties. And then the bylaw would create a zone variation P1C where a portion of the site permitting the overnight camping use. And as drafted, the bylaw would allow the following uses to the maximum that was shown in the applicant's proposed site plan. So those numbers of 5, 10 camps, 50 non-vehicle access campsites, 10 cabins, 35 vehicle access campsites, and then staff accommodation as well permitted. And the bylaw would have a bylaw map that's based off the applicant's proposed site plan at this point. And I'll just note that as the applicant continues to refine their proposal, it's possible and probably even likely that this could change a bit at second reading. It wouldn't be unexpected. Like right now it's showing the areas that are shown and it's carefully drawn to say, well, to be clear, it's not in the current covenanted areas for ecological protection. But it's possible through more detailed site design that we may come back and say, okay, the areas will move a little bit, but at this point, it's given that overall sense of, this amount of the land is proposed for this overnight camping use. And then just going through other parts of the report. So in terms of next steps, so staff recommend council direct staff to prepare and work with Metro Vancouver points of a restrictive covenant that would be a condition of the rezoning. So that is discussed in the report as the recommended approach to capture some of the phasing proposals put forward by Metro Vancouver, and tying that, as we do with many rezonings, tying that as a condition of the rezoning going forward. And then there's additional items staff are still seeking. So this support in the previous report talked about transportation demand management plan, transportation assessment, which kind of are updates coming from that transportation plan report. And then many committees and staff have flagged a visitor management plan or portions of it. So greater detail on proposed mitigation measures outlined by Metro Vancouver. including things like the reservation system and other strategies to reduce car visits to the proposed park. And some of the pieces that come from those studies may be things that are worked into them, that restricted covenant. So if the studies say, well, based on this operation of the park, these are ways we can operate the park to reduce impact, then we would say we would capture those in any covenant. And then I just wanted to flag here too that the report notes future conversation that maybe would take place as part of this conversation as well as just municipal assets at Cape Roger Curtis. And so I flagged sort of these different levels of assets that we have and how they relate to the proposed regional park. So number one being that there's municipal trails running through the subject properties. Is that something that if a regional park goes ahead as proposed, does the municipality still intend to operate and maintain trails through that regional park? Then there's a section of the municipal road that bisects the proposed regional park. So some question is that how would one proceed with the municipal road through the regional park? The third category being trails that extend from the municipal park in sort of that interior section of Cape Roger Curtis. So the part of the trail goes through the regional park and part continues through private property. And then the fourth category being the Seawalk Trail and beaches and road ends along the western shore. So council may want to discuss that tonight or at a future date, but sort of flagging it as questions that arise from a regional park at Cape Roger Curtis. And then this is just updated slightly from what I showed you at April 11th. So where we are today, April 24th, consideration of first reading, talking about council requiring additional information before proceeding, coming back to a future council meeting, receive more information for bylaws to committees, agencies, public engagement. And I flagged there too, council discuss phasing agreements, potential amendments to the bylaw as always possible, and any results of referrals. And I've put there the May 23rd, and that's just looking realistically to sort of what would be the earliest date it would come back. So it wouldn't come back to the May meeting. Then potential May 23rd would be the earliest. And then that would mean that the referrals and engagements from first reading would be taking place in June. And then on the sort of the side of the screen, the image is taken from our website, how we've outlined the process moving forward, and just showing those other sort of gates for council's awareness in terms of consideration of second reading, public hearing, third reading, referral to Islands Trust for OCP amendment approval, and then consideration of fourth reading. And then the recommendation is as in your agenda. So first reading for bylaws 608 and 609, and direct staff to report back with development of a covenant outlining a phasing agreement prior to referring the bylaws for comment. Thank you.
Okay, let's get into it. So I'm going to make a list here. So we'll start with, I'm just going to record hands. Okay. And just a couple of comments before we get into this. I think for the sake of the public who are here today and watching, where we're at in the process is exceedingly important right now. And where Bowen Island has been is we've been in this notion of the park for the better part of a year now. So since that initial release was made from Metro Vancouver, suggesting that Cape Roger Curtis would be part of the regional land acquisition strategy, followed by the media release in August, we've really been sitting in this. And that's sort of been decoupled from the actual process of how we're going to move forward and how we're going to elucidate solutions and how we're going to approach conversations in the community. So it's really important to remember here that this is tonight the very first reading of a bylaw, which is the entry point of how this looks for the municipality, how this looks for shaping the nature of the OCP amendment and shaping the rezoning. It will include a number of committee referrals moving forward. This isn't going to be done in a week or a month. It will probably be a few months at least. I'll look to the folks from Metro Vancouver here to talk a little bit about their engagement timeline as well, because I think the opportunity here as this moves forward is that we can start coupling Metro Vancouver's engagement process with Bowen Island's rezoning and OCP amendment process, which isn't something that's been happening until now, and I think has caused a lot of consternation at virtually all levels of this thing. So this is just the entry point of a process. We've got lots of information and diagrams as to how that process is laid out on our website at bowenislandmunicipality.ca. We do our very best with the limited resources that we have to have that updated, and I will credit our corporate officer for keeping that webpage updated with letters and materials and information that we receive from Metro Vancouver. And everything that we've done on this is available to the public. So we've done 2 rounds of committee referrals right now that are available on YouTube and can be watched and checked out. All of our council meetings have been open to the public. We're happy to take public comments. And we have read many, many letters and had many, many conversations and been stopped on the street as well. And we're, I won't speak for my fellow councillors, but for me, we're happy to have those conversations moving forward. So that's the process where it stands on Bowen Island. Maybe I'll just look to our Metro Vancouver participants here to talk a little bit about the engagement process and what's included in phase 1 and what's upcoming in phases 2 and 3 of engagement.
Thank you, Mayor Leonard and members of council. Thank you for having us tonight. My name is Mike Redpath.
And I didn't introduce you. I'm so sorry. I should have introduced you in your titles.
I'm the Director of Parks for Metro Vancouver. I'm joined today by Jeff Fitzpatrick, who's the Division Manager of Design and Development for Regional Parks. Thank you, Mayor Leonard. As you know, Metro Vancouver publicly announced the decision to acquire the 240 acres of Cape Roger Curtis on Friday last week. It was at the completion of phase 1 of a 3-phase engagement process. Phase 1 was the listen and learn process, and also the referral to the committees from our January 27th presentation, where we were here at your committee of the whole meeting. The second phase of the engagement process details really fleshes out the concept. But before we, concurrent with the second phase of our engagement process, it's also our intention to continue responding to the referrals that we receive from the committees. And 3, Mr. Martin mentioned in his report today, the Transportation Demand Management, the Transportation, the TDI, the TDM, and the Visitor Management are 3 important documents that we're working on as we speak. It's tough for me to give a deadline because a lot of them are being driven by consultants as well, with lots of input, both from the municipality as well as from our staff at Metro Vancouver. I would expect approximately 4 to 6 weeks for those to be completed. Concurrent to that process, we will be taking the concept that Mr. Martin has included and that we've used throughout our listen and learn engagement process. And it's our intention to flesh that out more with some variations on the theme, with including overnight use and providing more detail. And through this process, the engagement process will strengthen the concept each time we bring one forward to you and to the community as well for feedback. We expect that process to go through June as well. And concurrently, so those are both concurrent process, but the third concurrent process is that it's our expectation that we will be re-engaging with your committees as well and other agencies, as you had mentioned, Mayor Leonard, and members of the committee. We look forward to engaging with you and the community members through that referral process again. We're happy to answer any questions you might have about the process today. Really, we're just very excited to be back today and talking about advancing this project at first reading, and appreciate the support we've had from your CAO and planning team.
Thank you. Okay, and I will start with Councillor Saunders.
Thank you, Mayor Leonard. Thanks very much. Most of what I wanted to say you already said, so I appreciate that. And so it'll cut me down to 30 seconds instead of 3.5 minutes. I've been a little bit, this is a personal comment here, I've been a little bit disheartened at some of the vitriol I've seen around this discussion. Where people, I get the sense that some people, not everybody, but some people seem to think that we've now locked ourselves into something that may not be tenable for a lot of citizens of Bowen Island. And further to what the mayor has already stated tonight is that's not the case at all. We do know there's a whole lot of issues to work out. All we've done at this point is indicated to Metro that we intend to work in good faith to find something collaboratively working with them that works for both Bowen Island and for Metro. So essentially it's the process, which is what you've described. So thanks for that. And yeah, that's basically all I wanted to say with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Saunders. Councillor Morris.
Are we dealing with both bylaws at the same time or just one at a time? We're gonna deal with the OCP first and then the land use bylaw, or?
I think for now, let's have general comments on the whole package because they influence each other, and then we'll get into perhaps looking at the specific
Okay, because
recommendations.
I've got a couple of specific amendments that David said there was only one typo. There was actually one in the OCP and there's one in the land use bylaw, so there's two. So there's a small typo that we need to fix in the land use bylaw in 2.1 sub C. We renumber the subsequent objectives, not the subsequent policies. And I think the suggestion that was made by the planner, for clarity, I think we need to insert the words Cape Roger Curtis into policy 190. And whether we do it as permitted in regional parks at Cape Roger Curtis or say permitted in a regional park at Cape Roger Curtis. I think a regional park at Cape Roger Curtis. But I think for clarity for 190, we have to insert the words Cape Roger Curtis in there. Otherwise, I think the interpretation that we're allowing camping at Crippen is a fair interpretation, and that's not what we're dealing with at all. So let's just be clear and make that Cape Roger Curtis. Other than that, I think there might be a little wordsmithing that needs to be done as we go along. With the sort of, somebody's pointed out the wording in policy 155 about mixture of supervised camping, vehicular camp, but not including recreational vehicle or trailers. So, but I think that's the sorts of things we can deal with at second reading. That, yeah, certainly we need to deal with the transportation and road access issues, and I think we'll wait for the reports and see what happens. And then with the land use bylaw, there's just, I think there's one change that needs to be made to the definition of tent cabin. I don't think a tent cabin is a building, it's a structure. Buildings people think of more with permanent walls and things like that. So I would rather see tent cabin means a structure with a maximum lot coverage constructed for temporary accommodation. So it's just, tent cabin is just a little less permanent than a building. So that's something I would like to throw out. And all through the OCP amendment, we refer to private motor vehicle. And the land use bylaw just uses the word motor vehicle. So I think to be consistent, it should be private motor vehicle in there. Those are the sort of changes I'd like to see at this point. I did note that policy 189 in the OCP is very clear that there is no recreational vehicle or trailer camping. So whether or not we even need to have those words excluding recreational vehicles in the definition of camping. But it's for clarity, it's there, but it's probably not. It's probably redundant because it's very clear in policy 189 that there's no recreational vehicle camping. So. And yeah, so I'm quite happy. And the other is people have said they haven't had enough time. First reading is just getting it on the table for discussion. So I'm very happy to give with those couple of those small typos. The typo in the land use bylaw is in the map. It's passive part bracket C bracket P1 bracket C. That first little bracket C has to be deleted.
Okay.
That's the other.
So we'll come to those language changes.
Yeah, well, I just wanted to throw them out now,
Yeah.
so Sophie can be, Daniel.
No, that's great identification. Thank you, Councillor Morse. Councillor Wake.
Hey, Chair. To Mr. Martin, and really, I'm just echoing the comments that Mayor Leonard and Councillor Saunders and Councillor Morse already said. Just wanting to reassure people that we are, I guess the question is is there anything that we are setting in stone by passing first reading, or is all this stuff subject to change moving forward?
Through the chair, so anything given first reading, council can amend at subsequent reading, or council could rescind readings if you want to, essentially go back a step and say we've given a second reading, now we want to rescind second reading to go back to first reading.
Could you speak a little louder, please? Thank you.
So through the chair again, council giving readings to a bylaw can be rescinded, or council could, further amend the bylaw. And it is fairly common in rezoning applications that they receive first reading, they go for referrals, staff bring a report back with results of referrals and recommended amendments. It's fairly typical that's kind of the point of doing the engagement, is that you're going to change it based on the results of that engagement. Yeah.
Thank you. I just want to reassure people that we haven't approved anything. I think we just started the discussion. And I have some question for Mr. Red. Should I do that? Can I?
Yeah, let's do it. No, this is the question period.
Okay, so Mr. Redpath and Mr. Fitzpatrick, in policy 155, section 6.3, page 98 of our agenda package, we have section 6.3, community parks, is amended by amending objective 143 to read as follows. Objective 143, to encourage Metro Vancouver Parks to work closely with the municipality on all planning and management decisions related to Metro Vancouver Regional Parks on Bowen Island. And my question to you is, how can we set up a process that will allow us to work together collaboratively, Bowen Island and Metro, as partners to achieve our mutual objectives of protection and connection in a very special place while respecting the needs of our island residents? And I appreciate one way you've already mentioned is by working with committees, but I just wonder, I just want to hear you embrace the fact that we are really going to work together on this. It's not going to be you listen, you go back and plan, you come out again, that we actually have some interaction in between. And the reason simply being, I think Bowen Islanders you have a lot of expertise and experience with this, but Bowen Islanders have a lot of perspective as to what happens on Bowen Island that might be different from other places. We've got a lot of concerns here, and I just think working together, we can probably resolve those things better.
Thank you. And through Mayor Leonard, I would like to thank yourself, Councillor Wake, Councillor Getting, Councillor Still and Fast as well for attending our Regional Parks Committee. And you saw in our boardroom, in our chamber, that we're a federation. We're a federation of many municipalities, and together in that chamber, we act as one, but also with our local interests. I think this resolution is excellent. I think that if I direct you to our regional parks plan, that collaboration is one of our core values. And I think this process forces everyone as well to follow a regimented multi-step process that requires engagement as well. So certainly our listen and learn, we listened together and we learned a lot together. And this next phase is to build on that phase of engagement. As Mr. Martin has said tonight, I think repeatedly, this is the start of a process in response to your questions. And we're going to be laddering and layering on that feedback to have a stronger proposal at the end of the day. I would also, through the chair, be really interested in Councillor Wake's ideas of how we can strengthen that process, and happy to engage with you individually if you've got some ideas.
All right. Thank you.
Councillor Fast.
Thank you, Chair. So first off, I'd like to say that I feel good about the process that Planner Martin, you've proposed here with the idea of a covenant with conditions. And And I'm happy to give it first reading for the reasons that have been described by others here, to get it on the table and to demonstrate our good faith in the process, our trust in the process. I'm interested, I have a question, and it relates to policy 190. And the question is, does it have to have the word private before motor vehicle? Because right now it reads can be accessed by, or may be accessed by backpackers, bicyclists, or by private motor vehicle, etc. But I'm thinking, what about a shuttle bus or a co-op vehicle? I belong to a vehicle co-op, or a rental van, or a chartered school bus, those kinds of things. I'm just wondering, like Councillor Morris, whether the word private could be considered, and I'm happy to give it first reading tonight, but I did stumble over that one. And my second, so
I'm gonna parse that out.
Could we take that out tonight?
Yeah, I'll parse that out and let the planner respond.
Yeah.
So we're not inundating him with questions.
Yeah.
Sure, through the chair. So policy 190 in part addresses, there's a second policy in the OCP, or there's a current policy in the OCP talking about campgrounds are just serving the needs of backpackers and bicyclists. So the intent of this policy is to say that it is possible to have a campground on a regional park with access by motor vehicle. I don't believe that the word private is essential. I will just say in general. So I think that's a good point to make sure that it's clear that, it could be accessed by shuttle vehicles or whatever else. Obviously the bylaw that's before you has undergone extensive legal review. And I think any amendments that come tonight or any amendments that come at second reading, I would again be reviewing. And if any amendments made at a council meeting are flagged, then I would be reporting that to council.
I'm fine with leaving that in at first reading, with hearing what you're saying then. And partly just to move things along, I think that's a pretty minor thing. And similarly, in 155, I'm not sure that I have the right version in front of me. Can you put up your slide with 155 again? Policy 155?
Yes, just bear with me.
Okay. Because right now, I'll just say, right now it says campsites, vehicular campsites, but not including recreational vehicles or trailers, and walk-in, bike-in campsites sort of reads like all those end things aren't included. So I thought perhaps down there after the word, but not including recreational vehicles or trailers, you might insert and including walk-in, bike-in, because it looks like everything after not including is not included.
Right. I mean, I see sort of the list goes, group campsites, comma, and then it's like vehicular campsites with a subclause, and another comma for the next walk or bike and campsites.
Either move up to semicolons or clarify. I think it just could be clarified, and clarifying, speaking, I think, all of them have Schedule A, which says where this is happening. But I don't have any objection to putting the words in Cape Roger Curtis in there, so that's clear to everybody who might not go as far as the end part. I have, so that's the, otherwise I'm pretty happy. I think the idea of protecting the ecosystem, I've been following Metro Vancouver Parks' evolution over the past 30 years since I used to work with you, and every year, every time that the regional parks plan is updated, it's stronger in terms of protection as well as the connection part. And so I'm comfortable that it's one of the best ways there is to preserve and protect biodiversity and the environment. And in response to some of the concerns we've had in letters and I'm one thing I would ask, perhaps it's for Jeff, I'm not sure, is I saw the list of species and that are of concern and the efforts you're going to find out more information about them. And I'm wondering if what wasn't mentioned there was water and septic. And in terms, normally we would be making sure there was adequate water and septic for a development. I'm wondering, how will you propose to make sure there's enough water and unpolluted groundwater, antiseptic, if you want to call it that, for those unique ecosystems that rely on those groundwater processes?
Through the chair, thank you. It's a great question. We have engaged some hydrologists and some engineers for looking at water on site in terms of what the needs would be both for park visitors and also the ecosystem. So we're looking at that right now, and we'll know more about that shortly. As council knows, the site was prepared for development, and it was prepared with wells and other infrastructure for large individual homes. And of course, we're proposing a different use, so we're confirming if what is there is adequate. It might be too much than what we need, and making sure that we've got the right fit going forward. So it's a long way of saying that work is underway, and we're looking closely at it.
Thank you, because I'm concerned about the biodiversity hotspot that's fed by that little seep.
Yes.
So the water comes out of the earth near the cliff. And I think water is water interacts with the ecology a little differently there, I think, than most other regional parks that I'm familiar with. And so I just wanted to flag that as an area of concern for me. And then the last one is just safety on White Sails and the other approach roads. I'm glad to hear that Crow TBC is going to come and speak to us, because I think I'm interested too in options for traffic calming on White Sails. Unlike other parts of Bowen, it doesn't have those telephone poles beside it. So when people turn onto that road, it all kind of opens up and it's straight. And I think there might need to be some traffic calming done right away now that Keep Roger Curtis is in the news and that kind of thing. So I look forward to your presentation. And increased pedestrian safety, that kind of thing. So, but that's not really a question for staff. I just wanted to say that as a sort of general thing. I'm in support of these motions, and I'd be happy to move them.
Thank you, Councillor Fast. And I'll look to Councillor Getty.
Question for the planner. Mr. Martin, the mention of this development permit area, that is an outstanding matter that from the previous council that has not been followed up on. Does that have to be, do we get ourselves into legal problems if we don't have that sorted out prior to the next step with respect to these bylaws?
Through the chair, I could not think of a legal implication of that.
If it came in after these bylaws, it was passed, and then it was somehow something that wouldn't be binding on Metro and all of their plans?
So the adoption of a development permit, would be enforced on, like, council has the ability to place the development permit over properties and establish guidelines for that. And there's requirements in terms of any, OCP amendment about consultation and public hearing and the necessary steps. But at that point, council can require a development permit on a site, regardless of the stated development of the site. I think that, it's like if council does that following a park being developed and the development taking place, it's like, well, you can't, assuming this is a development permit for protection of natural environment, you can't retroactively impose development permit requirements on development that has taken place. It's for development that is proposed and is going forward.
So strong maybe.
No, so I'm saying there's not legal implications from the municipality's point of view of requiring a development permit, but it's not, but council would not have the ability to apply it to retroactively.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. I'll look to the CAO to respond.
Yeah, just to echo what the planner was saying, all of Bowen Island has development permit areas. Some development are within development permit areas and some are not within development permit areas. And a lot of the properties that have been developed, like since before we were even a municipality, have development permit areas that now apply to them. And so I believe what the planner is saying is that if there's no development permit area established prior to the park development, whatever development occurs in the park would be considered to be there and existing. And then if the municipality came in after the fact, there's nothing restricting, no legal restrictions or conflicts of then creating a development permit area saying going forward, any new development in the park area would require a development permit. And so, but given that it is a regional park and the regional district has its own development guidelines and its own development planning process, which is quite robust and evidenced throughout the entire region in terms of its level of strict preserve and protect principles, I would be very confident that any development that would occur within the park, regardless of whether we had a DPA or not, will be held to a very high standard of environmental protection. And so I think to answer the legal question, there's no restrictive legal concern about advancing now and bringing in a DPA later. It just wouldn't apply to anything that was already developed before the DPA was established.
So it would be an issue of clarity in terms of an expectation, no matter how robust Metro's regulations are, it would be clear, give them great clarity that what it is that our priorities are, what we need in terms of a development permit area. And if there were any conflict, then it would be clear in terms of what our expectations would be. And it is how we can, if we need to, enforce compliance with whatever is in an agreement, correct?
Right.
So it's an insurance in terms of making sure that we're in sync in terms of the regulations and that it doesn't get lost in any way.
Right. And if I may add, so the development is embedding the DPA within the OCP, just to throw a few acronyms out, is again on the staff work plan list to do. The park is likely, if it moves forward, to achieve its rezoning designation, but not achieve its full implementation and build out for multiple years. And the development permit area would likely be established prior to the full build out occurring. Additionally, Metro Vancouver is already undertaking much of the work that we would require through a development permit area. So whenever somebody comes forward for development permit within a protected area through like a proximity to a watershed or water course or things like that, we require an environmental assessment and which identifies mitigative measures, identifies whether or not the proposed work would be impactful and all of those types of assessments. Metro Vancouver is currently already doing that work and has already done some of that work and will continue to do more of that work. I see the planner.
I'm going to go to the planner and then I'm going to go to first time speaker. So it'll be Councillor Jurgensen, Morris Fast, or Getty still has the floor. The planner, then Getty, then Jurgensen.
Through the chair, I was just going to say too, the development permit area for Cape Roger Curtis, section 7.1, was in the land use bylaw and our earlier OCP, sort of envisioning future residential development of Cape Roger Curtis. So there's guidelines in there regarding what happens in a subdivision. What happens to different things. Some of the clauses in it are subsequently covered across the island. So there's guidelines about access to wetlands and water courses and setbacks to water courses that already exist in our 7.2 development permit area, so our watershed aquifer stream protection DPA are already covered. And then some of the conditions, again, as I say, sort of relate to subdivisions, or even as I look, that they meet requirements of the BC Water Act, which would be enforced anyway. So I'd sort of almost invite that if there are specific conditions in here, flag and say, well, we want a park to have to follow these. So I can see we talk about like fencing to environmentally sensitive areas should be fenced. Things like that could just be conditions in the restricted covenant as a condition of rezoning. Or if there's some that the council feel are not covered, then maybe we say, okay, maybe is that an appropriate place for a development permit area? But simply putting the sort of the former Cape Roger Curtis development permit area that applied to the whole area pre-subdivision on this regional park, maybe some of the guidelines have purpose, but some of them don't. So maybe there's a simpler way to address that.
Mary?
Absolutely.
All right. So in your introduction, you said that this had been, it had been about a year since we first heard about the acquisition strategy. Well, there was, in fact, it was part of the meetings of the Metro Parks, but it was never reported out in any of the local meetings of the council. I went through and looked at all of the tapes and there was no mention of it whatsoever. So we first heard about this in headlines in the local papers about camping on Bowen Island. This was just before the election. So that's 4 months ago, or 4 months until there was the February 27th Committee of the Whole meeting, where there was the presentation by Parks. So we've had this in front of us, and that was roughly 2 months ago. So we've been dealing with this for 6 months. There have been 2 rounds of committee referrals, but the first round was very informal. It was before we had the application. I've sat on a couple of meetings and with committees, and there's an overwhelming sense of a lack of information. And in particular with the transportation report, there was a great deal of concern in terms of the independence of that, the authors of that, and where they got their information and what the questions were that were proposed to them, and a very strong suggestion from that committee that somehow or other we figure out a way of collaborating with each other so that we had a more evenly understood terms of reference for whatever the next phase was. And clearly transportation is a huge problem with this whole proposal. So if, as Mr. Fitzpatrick says, it's going to be 4 to 6 weeks before there's an update in some of those reports, and we still haven't dealt with the issue in terms of independence, or one of the major questions raised was can we at least start with some baseline statistics of what the traffic is on White Sails in particular, before we sit down and try and see whether or not traffic calming seems like a small step as opposed to, I don't know if speed bumps are really going to be the answer. But my understanding with respect to the development permit area and the concerns of is it the Wild Coast 3-lot conservation?
Nature refuge.
Yeah, the Conservancy is very, very concerned about aspects of the development permit area being set up and clear before we sit down and start working on, whether or not it's going to be, what the phasing in is going to look like, whether or not we're going to start with all the individual campsites, or we're going to start with group campsites, whether or not we're going to have a shuttle, whether or not we're going to have permits, and what the parking looks like. And, we might not get into private vehicles if there is a shuttle. So it seems to me that there's a very, very long list of, and we talked about this at the park committee meeting in terms of all of the legitimate concerns. And I don't want to give the wrong impression that we're ready to move on this. And I don't want us to be balanced. Seeing something on paper and having those kinds of orders and speed, just the words that are used in the ones that are here, whether we wordsmith it or not, boxes us in, and I'm not sure that I'm not ready to sit down and even entertain this first reading at this point. There's way too much information that we need to try to work through. So I don't know if, if Metro, at the last meeting, we felt under an enormous amount of pressure to calm Metro down, that we wanted to try to work this through. And so we referred it to staff for bylaws, and we wrote the letter, and we showed up at the Parks Board meeting. And, if they've made the decision, it hasn't closed yet, but if they've made the decision to proceed with it, then that gives us a little bit of time to try and figure out what the information is that we're going to be getting. Where can we go with that? Is there any, what are the real stumbling blocks, and what are the potential opportunities to work on it? So I don't know that Metro wants or needs or is desperate to have first reading, if that makes a big difference to them. But I think we need to get a lot of this information to try and figure out a bylaw that works, and more than just, the odd word here and there. Anyway, I think 6 months is pushing it, and I think that we've got a lot more time. We should take it.
Thank you, Councillor Getty. Councillor Jurgensen.
Currently unmuted.
Hi, thank you so much.
And
sorry, I've been having technical difficulties and had to connect and reconnect to the meeting, but I did catch this item here in its full. I just wanted to state that I support what Councillor Getty said. I was going to make many of the same points she did, and I won't rehash those. I did also have some additional questions for Metro on accessibility and what exactly accessible campsites are, because 35 of them are flagged as accessible campsites, and those are the ones that permit the vehicles coming in, but needing a bit more clarity on what that is as well. But as I said, all the other points I was going to make, Councillor Getty has already made, so I'm not going to rehash those, but especially the ones around that lack of information. But no, I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Councillor Jurgensen. I'm going to jump into the speaker's order here, seeing that all councillors have spoken already. The couple of pieces here. So if I'm understanding correctly, with the challenges of the existing OCP amendment is really when we look at section 7.1 of the land use bylaw, there, if I understand it correctly, there are items in there that were slated to be put into an OCP amendment that have not yet. So effectively 7.1 of our land use bylaw, no effect. Is that correct?
It's correct, although the 7.1 was in our land use bylaw since adoption in 2002, and when we adopted the updated OCP in 2010, it did not include a development permit area for Project Curtis. So 7.1 has not been in effect since, I guess, 2011 when we adopted the OCP and removed development permit area for Project Curtis.
Okay. And if I understand it correctly, in September of 2021, when land use bylaw, there was some omnibus land use bylaw amendments that came forward. The intention from council, the direction from council was to proceed, was actually explicitly not to remove that language from the land use bylaw, but to proceed with an OCP amendment.
Correct. And then at council 2022 strategic planning, it was not identified as a priority item.
Okay. And then if I understand correctly from that discussion and watching those meetings, and from staff, some of the challenges with that is that there are elements of section 7.1 that have been covered off by other pieces of legislation or in other areas.
Correct. So as I look at that 7.1 is essentially 10 points, one of which 0.5 has a number of sub-points up to letter O. I'm not sure how many numbers that is. But so numbers sort of 3, 4, and 5 relate to work within a water course. And that's covered by our WASP EPA, so our watershed aquifer stream side protection. Points 1 and 2 relate to construction on steep slopes. 6 is about water course crossings, so bridges and culverts. So again, would be covered by our WASP GPA.
Okay, so I don't want to get too far down in the weeds here going point by point. But given that we've heard from our advisory planning commission that it would be, helpful, or that it would behoove council to look at doing an OCP amendment that revolves around cleaning that piece up. In the absence of that, what I've also heard is that if there are elements in 7.1 that we'd like to add for this project, we could just write that into
Covenants.
into either the covenants or this bylaw 6.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. And then that wouldn't preclude in future, so that would constrain the development to those elements that we want to see currently without needing to proceed through an OCP amendment. But wouldn't also preclude the possibility of doing a development permit area in the future for Cape Roger Curtis as a whole.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Other questions are, so one of the pieces that doesn't feel highlighted to me, and it was in the staff report, but it looks as if the language came out of the bylaw itself, was, and I don't see this in the OCP amendment, but the number one piece of importance for this project is going to be vehicle access. And that the site design, and we've seen this in the Metro Vancouver materials where in terms of limiting vehicle access and looking at possibilities like a park shuttle, but we don't see that in the OCP amendment. It doesn't appear that we take a strong stand that the park should be designed as much as possible to limit vehicle access. Is that language that we can put back in? I notice in the staff report, there is a line there that says site design and implementation is to minimize vehicle access and environmental access, but that doesn't show up in policy 155 in the bylaw itself. Is there any reason why the vehicle part of that was removed from policy 155?
What do you mean by removed?
So it shows up in the staff report, but it doesn't show up in the bylaw proper or in the OCP amendment proper. Or is a simple question, can we add that back in?
I guess I'm confused by the adding back in because you mean simply adding it?
So policy 155, as it reads in the bylaw, says, and this is where it differs from what's in the staff report. In the bylaw, it says, a regional park at Cape Roger Curtis may include a mixture of specialized or supervised overnight campsites, including group campsites, vehicular campsites, not including recreational vehicles or trailers, walk-in or bike-in campsites, trails, education programs, interpretive signage, accessory buildings or structures. And I believe in the staff report in policy 155, there's a sentence at the end that says site design and implementation is to minimize vehicle access, environmental access.
Oh, correct. So that, yes, I believe that clause was removed through the legal review because of concerns over overlap with policy 190, which talks about minimizing impacts to the environment. But you're right, like the vehicle access, I don't see a harm in reinserting that, like inserting that clause into the bylaw.
Okay.
Near the staff report.
Right. It's written one way in the report and the other.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
That's what was confusing me.
And my belief is that there's a clear signal that needs to be sent even at this early stage that that vehicle access is really, so it's not necessarily that there's going to be issues around the visitor use. It's really the vehicle problem that is probably the number one concern for this project. So that would be one part. The other comment that I would have in terms of, I got a couple of questions. One is around the transfer of trails and road. So this has come up in the community a lot, and I think it might be beneficial for the public to hear this answer. Is that what is it that the municipality actually owns out there? Is it parkland? Do we actually own the beaches? And will that be a disposition of parkland that needs to be handled in any kind of transfer?
Good. So when I show this map, there's a variety of answers. So where you see the trails that go, where's my cursor? trails going through the sites, which are up on Bona as the dotted orange. We have statutory right-of-ways across private property that give us the right to have a trail to maintain a trail for the public to access along those routes. Number 2, showing Cape Drive, that's a municipal road that was dedicated at time of subdivision. Closing a municipal road requires a bylaw for a road closure, and then it would be a subsequent disposition of land if that's the intent, is to provide it as part of the regional park. And so there's notice requirements for disposition of land, but we don't own it as park. And then the 4 road ends were taken as roads, as access to the sea at time of subdivision. So not as parks, but they are essentially municipal road as well. So the area, by Pebble Beach or by the lighthouse where you can see on Bonap where the road comes in, the lane comes in and then widens, and we have additional land around it. That was all taken as that access to the sea requirement. And then again, the Seawalk Trail exists as a statutory right of way as well.
Okay.
So, I think the mechanism would be different for each of those categories. So like the statutory right of way, I'm not clear that we could transfer it, but we could, could be that we have a license agreement with Metro Vancouver that essentially they're maintaining it as part of their regional park network. And the road closure would be closed and would need a bylaw and notice for disposing of land. And similarly, sort of the road ends, because we took them at subdivision, as access to the sea, that's a requirement in the Land Title Act. We couldn't close those roads and turn the land, dispose of the land, but again, we could probably license them for somebody else to manage maintenance and operations of that statutory right of way.
Okay.
And if I may add, Mayor, so none of the municipally managed trails and access are designated park lands, just for clarity, and so it's not a matter of disposition of parkland. And with certainty, there's pros and cons of working out an arrangement for Metro Vancouver to take over operations and management of those. And so those are something that council needs to consider.
Okay, thank you. And then the last comment that I have is around, so looking at the land use bylaw portion, in section 2.1, it gets into the actual breakout of sites. One of the pieces I'm curious about is looking at that in a way that doesn't, how would I frame this? That doesn't dictate an initial composition of sites at this early step, but still, but then also allows Metro Vancouver to proceed with their site design in a way that, was sort of initially intended. Because my understanding at that level is that there may be variations on the concept or ethos or how this plays out in some degree, right? So the imagining that I have is that if this is really a park that's dialed in towards and is front loading or foregrounding, active transportation and transit, that, there's room to work within that if they want to, downcycle vehicle access campsites or, play with that composition as that design process is going on. So my curiosity would be whether it's possible to change the language of that section to something that says, you can have, the zoning allows for a combined total of 100 sites. And, 1/3 or 3/8 of those, 1/3 or just above, given the staff accommodations, could be allocated to the vehicle sites. And the balance of those could be put against those other primary uses like the group tent sites, non-vehicle access, tent cabin, et cetera. And whether that's a workable solution there.
To the chair, I think that would be, I would have to maybe think about, what the ideal final language would be, but some idea where it's a total maximum and then a maximum percentage of those being the vehicle access campsites. I think would work and make sense, and also sort of precludes the option of just developing the vehicle access campsites and not the rest, and saying, if you only develop 60, well, only 1/3 of that 60 could be vehicle access, right? So if it was 1/3, it would be 20 of the 60 or however that functions. The other option that I haven't put in the bylaw that would be something for council to consider is that like our land use bylaw has parking requirements, and most traditional land use bylaws, we have a minimum. So we have a number of parking spaces that are required for different uses. Some jurisdictions have moved to parking maximums. So they want to limit the provision of parking.
Yeah.
And so that's something that could be considered of saying, well, you have a maximum parking space available for the vehicle access campsites or even for a park as a whole for a land use.
Okay. I mean, ultimately, I note that both in the phase in that's been shared with us in terms of the implementation plan, as well as knowing that there's other variables that are going to move along the way. So whether, because we're talking about Park Shuttle, TransLink has really sort of not commented on this at all. Or they've commented saying we can't look at it right now. But as we've got the multi-use path. So as those active transportation and transit solutions get built out and solutions start coming out of the woodwork, Metro Vancouver or Bowen Island or, the partnership of how it works might, seek to, like even 10 years down the road, change the composition of their campsites. And this sort of zoning right now doesn't really give the ability to do that because it's really regimented in there as to how many types of sites are allocated. If that makes sense. And is that something that we could change now or that we would need to postpone or that you would recommend looking at for a second?
I think I would recommend if council wants to make that change is to make it now. And then, if I come back with revised wording to capture the same intent, then that may happen. But it's better to have if council's intent is to make that change now and then.
Okay. Yeah. Maybe we'll put it on the screen in a little bit and then I can have the Metro Vancouver folks comment on it as well to see what works, knowing that there's multiple players in the room. I would support the first reading, with some changes and some ability to be a bit flexible here, knowing that we're going to have more information coming in, knowing that there are elements in 7.1 of the land use bylaw that I think would be worthwhile in adding in here. My sense is the one piece that hasn't really been talked about in depth right now is that section 219 covenant and how that would influence the phasing in. And given that the recommendation is to direct to staff to do that and actually hold off any committee referrals until that happens. My sense is that as long as we've got, a draft bylaw that seems to capture the intent, and for me, it's really active transportation and transit and leaving those openings in there because this park will have a vehicle problem, I'm fine moving forward for first reading from there. I'll go to Councillor Morris, then Councillor Fast.
I was busy trying to think about how to fix the wording for everything you were saying.
I have a draft I can put up on the screen there.
I totally agree with the planner that I would even go further to say that there's really nothing in 7.1 Cape Roger Curtis Development Permit Guidelines that is either still applicable because the roads have been built, the subdivision's been done. And we've got development permit areas for stream and watershed protection and everything else. So, and provincial guidelines when they're fish-bearing streams. And so I think anything that needs to be caught could be picked up in a covenant. So at that point, I guess let's deal with the wording.
So we'll clear the speakers list and then, Councillor Fast, then Councillor Wake.
Thank you. I'm glad you brought that up, Mayor, because the bit about the wording on 155, because that's what was confusing me, and that's why I asked the planner to put up the right one from 155. I agree. I like it. Site design and implementation is to minimize vehicle access. The part I have the question about is and environmental access. Because it seems to me
That's
a
typo.
I think it's a typo and that should be disturbance probably. Minimize vehicle access and environmental
impacts.
Anyway, I just would wonder if that's going to show up in your wording. I like the idea of parking maximums. I also think I've looked at 7.1 and I don't, I don't see anything in there that, right offhand, that Metro Parks, plan, their most recent plan and the way they do things, doesn't already do it better. Should include a vegetation management plan. But we can have an environmental consultant making reports on what Metro Vancouver parks are doing. It just seems to me that this is for subdivision that happened before. So I'm happy with, if there's something there that people, and I'll look at it more carefully too, but that should be in a covenant, I think that's a good way to do it. Anyway, that's enough for me, and I'm still very supportive, but I'm interested in your wording.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Wake.
I'd like to just support your comments about vehicle access, and I, basically we've got the term in there, minimize vehicle access, and I think we need, and I don't think we need to do it now, but it's one of the things I'd like to flag moving forward, is I think we need to be a little clearer about what that means, because what it means to me is the only reason a private vehicle gets access is because there's an accessibility issue. And because you've got perhaps 7 vehicle access sites, if somebody, and we're taking reservations, if there's only 2 people that have, or 2 families that have access issues, accessibility issues, then does that leave 5 for anybody to grab because they're vehicle access? Or is it going to be, no, in order to reserve one of those sites and take your vehicle in, you'll have to have accessibility certification.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I don't think we need to deal with that tonight, but I think it speaks to, we've got to be very clear that we don't want any more vehicles in there, especially private, like shuttles, fine, but private vehicles, we don't want any more than we absolutely need. And that will also help with the parking issues.
And there's a balance too. I mean, I would offer that having spent a career in outdoor education and recreation, that talking about there's many different ways to talk about accessibility and equity in a park environment. So, there's the physical accessibility, but the accessibility of a family being able to get out there, maybe taking 1 vehicle instead of 2, because it's a lot to pack 3 kids in the car and get out and enjoy nature, particularly until transit options are borne out. Some of the vehicle pieces that we've done, the vehicle traffic on the island is also, not Metro Vancouver's fault. We have a tourism industry, we've got short-term rentals on the island, we have visitation happening as it is, and so there is this park issue, but I think as this unfolds, and I'll be looking for our committees for some advice on this, is in terms of, if we look at this in terms of a vehicle budget or ferry budget, where's the onus on our municipality as well to start regulating that and contributing that to drive things down?
Precisely. We haven't talked at all about resident vehicles, vehicle access.
But ultimately, in the short term, it's, we've got residents on White Sails that have been subject to construction traffic and vehicle traffic and speeding and, challenges with having kids play in the street for a long time. So there's a lot of holistic and short-term, medium and long-term impacts that I think we can look at and solve as this process unfolds. I saw Councillor Jurgensen. Do you still have your hand up?
And lowered.
Yes.
Currently unmuted.
Yes, I do.
Over to you then.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to say I appreciate comments on accessibility, that can take many different stripes. My comment earlier was not to limit what that term would context of a park, but rather just to gain some insight into how Metro Vancouver views that in terms of this park, and figuring out then, with that information in hand, what kind of measures can be put in place to help ease the burdens that might come from that usage, and if there's some alternatives that could be offered. Definitely all the better. The other question that I had was regarding the idea of going back to transportation and in a broader context than just the park, but also island-wide bus service and that kind of stuff. Looking at this as part of the process here and trying to see if perhaps we could strengthen that bus network as a form of mitigating the disturbance of traffic as well, while improving access to the island for those who don't drive in the first place.
Okay. Cool. So any other questions before we start looking at wording for motions within the bylaws themselves? Councillor Fast?
Well, I was going to actually move the motions in order to get them on the floor. And then I'm assuming that might be when your wording would.
Can we not amend the bylaw, the wording before the motion's moved?
I will look to, that's an interesting question. Maybe I'll look to our corporate officer as to the appropriate way to work within the bylaws.
Yep, so if council wishes to make amendments to the text of the bylaw, you can do so by resolution. Being that it's at first reading, you can also direct the manager of planning and development to make those amendments to return to second reading. But if you want to specifically make resolutions with amendments to the bylaw, that's for absolute clarity, then yeah, you can do that by resolution and then do the readings to give first. I'm seeing our manager of planning nodding there in agreement, so that's the best way to go about it.
Okay.
So then I'm happy to, you've got some wording?
Sure, so
Can we put the bylaws up on the screen?
Yeah.
Which one are we dealing with first, the OCP?
Sure.
So wait.
So the only amendment that I would have here would be in the.
Stop there, go back. 2.1 sub C.
No.
Change policies to objectives. Policy 190, Councillor Fast was wondering whether we needed the word private in front of motor vehicles.
Strike the word private?
So maybe we'll do these by unanimous consent, just so that we've got the approval of the body, and then if there's an objection, then we can tease it out. That works. I think that's probably quicker. So the amendment is to strike private motor vehicles. Or any objection to that amendment?
Daniel, got any?
So in policy 190, I have perhaps site design targeting active transportation and transit through the regional park will be encouraged. Vehicle use to the park should be disincentivized.
Discouraged.
Disincentivized is a little stronger than discouraged, so it's, you know, and there's ways to implement that, I think, messaging and reservation system through the way that the park is branded and languaged, and, you know, other policies that could target and get at that discouragement of just like economic disincentive. Yes.
Well, given the fact that it will be many, many years till there's a bus that will drive you from Hood Point all the way out to Cape Roger Curtis, I think discouraged would be a better word for starters.
You know, what I will offer is that this allows us to have conversations with other partners and even going to TransLink immediately after the board meeting on Friday. There's now appetite because it's a regional asset that's going to be on a, you know, on the far side of the island to extend transit to Cape Roger Curtis.
Yeah, but from all the other parts of the island?
I'm not sure as to how that's going to work.
Well, get your power signs out. And your subsidies.
Want a seconder for that?
Sure. Yeah, it looks like there's some objections. Seconder.
I'll second that.
Okay. Any discussion on this one?
My problem is the word disincentivized, so I will move an amendment that disincentivized be replaced by discouraged.
Seconder for that. Seeing none, we're back to the main amendment. I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, raise your hand, say nay. Carries.
Currently unmuted.
Aye.
Any other changes to the OCP bylaw?
Yeah.
55. Yes. That's fast.
In 155, after the word trailers, got the words and including walk or bike in campsites, just to make it clear. Otherwise, it looks like everything after the words not including is not included, like not including bike in campsites.
Yeah.
So I just thought that would be the clearest way, simplest little comment.
Or putting walk or bike in campsites first.
Well, there's lots of ways we could wordsmith this. This is the simplest one.
Yeah.
I could ask the planner if he would prefer to shift things around so that the camping, so that the words or trailers came at the very end. Maybe the planner has a preference.
I think through the chair, I mean, almost my preference would almost move to semicolon for the lists to show that because the not including recreation vehicles or trailers is the subcategory of vehicular campsites, and then walk or bike, you know, is a separate category.
I'm totally fine with semicolons either. I just wasn't sure that my meaning would be as clear to everybody in the room. So can you tell the corporate officer exactly where to put the semicolons would be what I'd offer through the chair?
Yeah. Correct. I think if it works like that, if council's okay moving forward like that, and then I may propose something that's more like elegant, but captures that intent that we're making clear that this is, yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And Mayor, I seem to recall you having a desire to bring back from the report some language into this piece.
Yeah,
Or is that
that's captured in 190.
And then just council had discussed campgrounds may be permitted in a regional park at Cape Roger Curtis as an amendment.
All right. And the first line of 190?
Sorry, so if, and yeah.
The regional park, Cape Roger Curtis.
Only one S on Curtis.
It's deleted.
Yeah, that's just.
The delete sort of went the wrong way.
I have,
Yes, Councillor Fast.
thank you. One more that I'm wondering is in the language right above E, so I guess it's the end of D. When it talks about accessory buildings or structures, in that long list, that is 155, my mistake. It doesn't include tent cabins, but that is in the land use bylaw.
Right.
All it does there is, it does include accessory buildings or structures, but these are for camping, they're not really accessory. Do you think we should, this is a question for the planner, would it be advisable to put in the word tent pads?
Probably to be safer, I would probably put it after group campsites before for the land use bylaw.
Thank you, Colleen.
Cabins.
Oh, tent cabins.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other pieces on the OCP amendments? Move on to.
Oh, let's vote on it.
Okay.
I would move that bylaw number 608, 2023, cited as Bowen Island Municipality Official Community Plan, bylaw number 282, 2010, amendment bylaw number 608, 2023 be read a first time.
Second by Councillor Fast.
As amended?
No, because we've.
Oh, because you voted.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any discussion on the first reading of the OCP amendment? Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
All opposed, raise your hand, say nay.
Nay.
Currently, I'm
Nay.
Councillor Getty and Councillor Jurgensen opposed. So can we get the land use bylaw up on the screen? So let's go up to 2.1. I might pull Vancouver folks into the conversation is this one. So it's the language that I have, so that should be B, C, and D. Language that I offered. Going back to the original.
That's the original bylaw that's on the.
Oh, the original bylaw is up there, and then corporate officer is just looking at some of the language that I gave her. Be able to put this on the screen.
Are you okay with A? The way it is?
It's 2.1.
4.11.3 bracket 3. Is added.
Yes, so there's the variations, and then in.
So you're okay with the following additional uses are permitted, principal uses?
Yes, I think that speaks to what the application is for. So we've got the group and camps, the non-vehicle access campsite, the tent cabin, vehicle access campsite, and staff accommodation.
Yeah.
I think down the road we should, as Vancouver's phase 2 and phase 3 unfolds, define group tent camping a little bit better. But the idea here is to replace that B, which gives a very strict prescription of how the mix of those sites can play out. Being highlighted here. So for Councillor Jurgensen's benefit, section B states 5 group tent camps, 50 non-vehicle access campsites, 10 cabins, 35 vehicle access sites. Is that lumping all of the classes together and saying that may not exceed a total of more than 100, which gives the 100 campsites, followed by a clause
It's got to be indented.
It says no more than a third of the additional principal uses in B may be directly accessed or capable of being accessed by motor vehicles. So that language around may being accessed or capable of being accessed by motor vehicles comes from the principal use language. And 1/3, I believe, speaks to the mix of the sites that's already there, with the staff accommodation being kept the same in a separate clause saying the number, or
The maximum number of additional.
the maximum number of the additional principal use for staff accommodation will be 1. So the aim here, and I'll look to the Metro Vancouver folks just as a confirming piece, is that the idea here is to be able to get to a maximum of 100 sites, which is in the rezoning application. But then depending on how the phase out rolls out, or if there's changes that need to be made along the way, that we're not coming back for an amendment to the rezoning. If that happens based on adaptive management, based on the data that you're taking in, but still gives you roughly the same number of sites.
Thank you, Mayor Leonard. I'm processing this as we go. The intention, the way that I understand the bylaw reads now with the amendment would be a maximum of 100. Yes, that's correct. The total is 100. And our submission was based on a preliminary business plan at the time that we had developed that created that breakdown. So our intention and our phasing plan is still to try to achieve that breakdown. Your worship, on item C, my question would be with respect to how would that accommodate the group camping to yourself as an outdoor educator? That would limit you driving because other sites could potentially be utilized as more accessible, equitable. Accessibility is on the spectrum in our definition. It includes equity as well as physical accessibility or accessibility for seniors or disabled persons as well. C, we would have, I think, a challenge with C because it would potentially limit access to the 10 cabins as well as potentially the group campsites because we're encouraging buses of guides, scouts groups, youth groups to come. They would come in what's classified as a motor vehicle, a bus or something like that. So 1/3 of the additional principal uses would be for drive-in car camping. That would be a limiter. And another way of achieving our original intention, which was that we would have 35 essentially, if you like, typical drive-in campsites. The maximum number of additional principal use for staff accommodation, I don't see any concerns with that. Or B, just C, I think is in conflict, and I'm trying to think how that could be stated so that we wouldn't be discriminating, if you like, against the proposed group use.
Right.
So just
say group tent camp accepted.
That would probably do it.
But
I just would like to check with the non-vehicle access campsite. So they would still be accessing the site with a shuttle. 10 cabins, they may be shuttle, probably would be shuttle.
Why don't you just use it for
Can we,
No more
can
than
we hear
one.
from our guest?
Well, I was just wanting to throw in a simple, no more than 1/3 of the additional principal uses may be vehicle access campsites.
It's just, so let's just use the language. So in C, at the end of C, comma, group tent camps accepted. So an understanding that this is first reading and that this is just the gist of things, and then, you know, there's going to be a.
And again, through you, Mayor, as I believe it was Councillor Wake or Councillor Saunders was talking about more detail in the second phase of the process, our registration system would require people booking a site to have any restrictions. So that's the next part of the conversation. So I think this would certainly work with the understanding that there's potential for refinement of the next phase of the process.
Great.
I just want to be really crystal clear because this is important and is the intention for the tent cabins to be non-vehicular access?
Through you, Mayor, no. The idea of the yurts and the tent cabins really came to us through our outreach and our best practice with Parks Canada and provincial parks as well, where they are providing access to families that don't have a tent, providing access to families that may not have the equipment. So essentially it's all set up for them when they come, and the staff at site would supervise and provide that access to give that experience that many families that can't afford the equipment might be able to access. So the intention would be in those cases potentially for them to be able to drive to the site, although we would certainly be encouraging alternate use. I would just note that in our regional parks plan, we do specifically reference, and I had the clause open, now I've closed it, that we would develop and implement new approaches to encourage sustainable transportation options to regional parks. That's goal 11.2 of our regional parks plan. And that is certainly something that through this next phase of the process, we want to try to encourage. So I would thank the CAO for flagging that, because it is certainly our intention to maximize equity and by limiting vehicular access for those cabins in particular, it would be an impediment to equity in our opinion.
Okay.
Could be.
Could be. Yeah, I mean, we
depends on
yes.
Well, it depends on who's coming, but, you know, we also know through research that, you know, a point of inequity in camping and green space use, you know, generally is the inability of having a car, the inability of getting out there. So this does, I think we can go back and forth on it, and we might be able to massage this in a second reading, but there's you know, something like 10 cabins would seem perfectly suited for a park shuttle or TransLink bus or something like that. Councillor Fast.
Thank you. That was my question too, was about the group camping and in C. I personally think it also should say and tent cabins, because that's why people belong to car share co-ops, which I belong to, or they borrow a car for some kind of special trip like that. That's what I would propose, tent cabins be in there as well.
So then why don't we just do the simple, no more than 1/3 of the vehicle access campsites made. No more than 1/3 will be vehicle access campsites. That's what you're, because you've already now said group tent camps and tent camps don't count. So the only thing that's left is the vehicle access campsite. So why not just say no more than
50%?
Vehicle access campsites can be no more than.
It would be.
I'd prefer this language, because what you're saying takes the group camps and the tent cabins out again.
No.
No.
Vehicle access campsite is a defined thing up there in the other part of the definition, if you scroll up to the top. So if you just see vehicle access campsite, following additional uses are permitted. So in your limiters, you're just saying no more than 1/3
Oh, I see. Okay.
maybe vehicle access campsite.
So what this
Must be not full.
does do, though, the ability that this does provide is down the road is if the move, for example, is to, within that 100 campsite configuration, to lower the number of vehicle access campsites because, you know, either public transit or shuttles or something has been, you know, really well implemented, then you could up the non-vehicle access campsites without needing to go back to the bylaw.
Why? It's no, so you can't say no more than 1/3. They can decide to only have 20. And we haven't got numbers for the other ones. So you've got 100, you choose to have 20 for vehicle access. That leaves 80 to divvy up between non-vehicle access campsites and group tent camps and tent camps. It just means.
Sorry, I would need to see it in language. I'm getting.
I'm
bugged.
going to second your motion for B, C, and D.
Okay, so it's been seconded. It's now on the floor. Any discussion on items B, C, and D here? I'm going to go.
But I think you're making it too convoluted.
I'm going to go to Councillor Jurgensen.
Currently unmute.
Sorry, just getting a little bit lost here in exactly what, so apologies, my question's out of bounds. The, it's for, yes, and just asking if there's a rationale for why tent cabin camping wasn't considered for all 100 sites, as it would limit what people need to bring in, therefore encouraging more alternate forms of people getting there than vehicles.
Right. It was part of the will of the group here that added the tent cabins as well.
It seems to me that what we're trying to do in the bylaw is establish maximums. And can't we, as part of the management plan, modify any of these things lower moving forward? So I think we're getting too prescriptive here.
Well, that's sort of what I was trying to get away from was so the way it's written in the original land use here is that it was very prescriptive. I'm trying to get to some principles of, you know, basically saying if vehicles are the problem, then how do we leave enough room in the zoning to get at it through the management plan, through other data or whatever it is. Councillor Fast.
Thank you. I do have one more proposal, and if you could scroll down to the definitions of vehicle access campsite.
Oh, sorry, before we amend this, it's been moved and seconded on the floor.
Okay.
For the set of amendments here.
Okay. One set at a time.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Any further discussion on these amendments? So I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, raise your hand and say nay.
Abstain.
Currently unmute.
Sorry, I didn't quite catch that, Councillor Jurgensen.
Currently unmute.
In opposition.
Okay. Councillor Jurgensen and Councillor Getty opposed.
Currently unmute.
And Councillor Fast.
Thank you. If you scroll down to vehicle access campsite, the definition, the bottom one there, where it says be accessed by motor vehicles, I'm wondering if we could put a comma and say except recreational vehicles and trailers. Because this is the land use bylaw where this is what will actually be enforced.
Right.
And so is that going to cause any trouble by saying that, Planner Morton?
There's a general prohibition against recreational vehicles and trailers, so it might be redundant.
I'm just looking for clarity. Yeah.
Clarity.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. I wonder if people are okay with having that in there just so that it's done.
I don't see the need for it.
Okay. I have it down with a question mark. I'm quite prepared to. But I did see some nodding from the Metro Vancouver folks. I mean, if it's clear. Okay, I move that amendment.
Okay, so it's been moved. Is there a seconder for the amendment? Is your hand up to second, Councillor Jurgensen?
Currently unmuted.
No, sorry, it was still up.
And
No
lowered.
problem. Okay.
Fair enough.
That is not brought to the floor.
Okay.
Any other amendments for the land use bylaw?
There's one little typo in the map.
Yeah.
Read that C after, I don't know whether you
Oh, it's
can.
an image.
You can fix that later. Later, yeah. It's a typo, so I'm sure it can be fixed without a motion.
Then I suppose, okay, no, actually, I don't have a question on that. Councillor Fast?
Then I'd like to move, if you've adopted those, I would like to move that bylaw number 609, 2023, cited as Bowen Island Municipality Land Use Bylaw number 57, 2002, amendment bylaw number 609, 2023 be read a first time.
Second. Second by Councillor Saunders. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, raise your hand, say nay.
Zoom us has news.
Councillor Getty and Councillor Jurgensen opposed.
And I'll move that council direct staff to report back with development of a section 219 covenant outlining a phasing agreement prior to referring bylaw number.
Currently unmuted.
Bylaw number 608, 608 and 609.
The seconder? Seconded by Councillor Saunders. Any discussion on the direction to staff to draft the section 219 covenant for the phase-in? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, raise your hand, say nay.
Currently unmuted.
Aye.
That carries with Councillor Getty opposed. Okay.
If you move quickly, you might catch the 9:30.
That's our plan. They give
It's
me
coming
a small
across.
dump truck to drive up here from our yard, so we'll see how quickly I get that. It's, we're walking. Hasn't left for a few days yet. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council. Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Unmuted.
How are you getting down there to the fair?
The dump truck's parked out front.
Is Carla driving down and leave the dump truck in our parking lot? Staff can pick it up tomorrow?
We have a little office down at the coffee.
Oh, right down there. Oh, okay. All right.
Thank you.
I was thinking of the new one.
Okay, folks, given we're at 3 hours and we still have a budget to do, that might, we're going to take a 5-minute recess and come.
And the meeting.
Yep. So come back after a 5-minute meeting and move to extend the meeting. Without objection? All right, so we'll reconvene in 5 minutes.
Point of privilege to the chair.
Yes, Councillor Jurgensen.
I just want to ensure that my final vote for the on the covenant question was recorded as in favor as opposed to opposed.
Yes, it was. Yes. Thank you.
Okay.
Press CMD plus. Hand lowered. Currently unmuted.
Councillor Jurgensen, are you back with us?
Currently unmuted.
Affirmative.
Okay, thank you. So, second course of the evening, item 7.2, and I'll recall this meeting to order. Number 604, the 2023 five-year financial plan, and bylaw number 605, the 2023 annual tax rates, to our CFO, Kristen Watson.
We need to extend the meeting.
I move that the meeting be extended until, what time is it now? To 9:45?
9:45, okay.
How much time do you need, Kristen?
I will make it as quick as I can.
Any objections to extending to 9:45?
Could we defer 8.1 and 8.2?
We'll do that when we get to them.
Okay.
Just, if I may, Mayor, if there is an intention to defer for the benefit of staff that are waiting.
Currently unmuted.
Okay, so let's step back then. We'll deal with the agenda items first, or the agenda questions first. So before we hear on 7.2, there are items. So the question around the table right now is whether we want to defer the staff reports in Section 8, the Baylink Connected Coast Project, the Blue Water Park Water System, Conservation Measures and Moratorium, the Bowen Island, the Birch request of waiver, the CAO update, whether we want to postpone that to another meeting.
Currently unmuted.
I would like to move for these items.
Move to postpone items 8.1, 8.2.
So 8.2.
So postpone Section 8 in its entirety to a future meeting.
Yes.
Okay. Moved by Councillor Jurgensen, seconded by Councillor Saunders. Any discussion on this?
Is the DVP for the housing thing time sensitive?
Currently.
Seeing no further discussion, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Currently unmuted.
Thank you, Councillor Jurgensen. Carries unanimously.
Currently unmuted.
Dropping back to item 7.2, our five-year financial. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. This evening, I am bringing forward two draft bylaws for consideration by council. The first is the five-year financial plan. The second is the establishment of the annual tax rate bylaw. Both have a requirement to be adopted by council before May 15th of this year. So tonight we will be recommending to council that the bylaws be given a first, second, and third reading. Just to highlight the draft financial plan that has come forward for consideration by council. It includes a 14.3% property tax increase for 2023. And it includes a proposed increase for each of the following 4 years of 9.5%. And that is the result of a direction provided by council at the April 11th council meeting. Direction to staff was provided to bring forward a bylaw that included those property tax increases. Just a quick overview. The bylaw includes a provision for salaries and benefits that has been included at 4% for the first year. And the rest of the operating expenses have been increased by 3% in each of 2024 through 2027. Some of the cost drivers for the 14.3% tax increase this year include salary increases of $353,000. Other operating expenses, including initial costs to open and commission the new community center of $190,000. By far the biggest driver as the payments required to service the new debt, almost $450,000. There was a $67,000 increase to the library transfer.
We're increasing reserve fund contributions from property tax revenue by 110,000. And as directed at the April 11th meeting, we're adding $65,000 in new asset management resources in order to help with the council direction to prioritize asset management plan development in this year. Those increases are offset, they're mitigated a little bit by a couple of things, including new revenues that we have. For example, there's the 50,000 from the BC Hydro lease at the old fire hall. We've got additional revenue expected from recreation programming, and with interest rates going up, we do expect to earn additional revenue on our savings this year. We're also offsetting that with a draw of accumulated surplus of $100,000. So overall, the total property tax change is about $940,000, which is how we reached that 14.3% increase. I just wanted to draw attention to council of that inclusion of the $65,000 for the asset management resources. Just unpacking that increase to the salaries a little bit. There are the COLA, the cost of living allowance, the grid progression annualized impact is about 4%. And then we have included an additional 1.3%, which accounts for labor market adjustments for salaries for our staff. And that's where we get to the total increase of $353,000. So of the total change, $940,000 as a straight percentage increase over 2022, it works out to about 14.3%. An average residential property owner who owns a property worth just under 1.5 million will be looking at about a $400 per year increase. And for people who would like to calculate that based on their assessed value, it works out to about almost $2 per $1,000 of value, 1.9983. In 2022, that rate was 1.878. So we're actually looking at an increased rate this year because the overall assessment base has not increased significantly over last year, but we do have this this requirement to collect the $940,000 more of property tax revenue. That 14.3% increase, it's going to be mitigated a bit. There was non-market change, which again is the value of new construction that has been added to the roll. So the average property tax paid by an owner would effectively be reduced by about 0.8% because of the new subdivisions, new lots, new construction that is on the roll that wasn't there last year. And as well, a decision by council made to change the property tax distribution ratio, whereby the utilities class properties have been increased to 20 times the residential rate. So effectively, that will mean that it feels like a 1%, about a 1% decrease in the impact to the average taxpayer. So the effective rate of the this property tax change year over year is about 12.5%. And so for the average homeowner, that effective rate will feel like about $348 per average homeowner. Just to go over the budget consultation process, it ran from March 14th to 31st. It included a couple of open houses, 2 open houses. We had a committee of the whole where we discussed the property tax ratios, and then a second committee of the whole where we discussed capital projects. And through the feedback and recommendations that were incorporated into the draft plan, that has resulted in the change from the initial proposed 13.3% to increase to 14.3% for 2023. And again, that was done as a means to prioritize asset management plan development. And this has been incorporated into the financial plan. So through the remainder years from 2024 to 2027, the increase has been set at 9.5% with additional property tax revenues being contributed to capital reserves to fund future infrastructure needs and replacements. And this is being included, of course, It gets revisited each year as we go through the financial plan development process, but it's a really effective way for council to communicate to the public that there really is a need to focus resources on increasing reserves and following through with infrastructure renewal and replacement. The property tax distribution ratio per council direction has been increased from 4.16 to 20 times the residential rate on utility class properties. And that will result in $85,000 or just over 1% of the total property taxes being collected from the utility class 2 properties. It again, it doesn't increase the overall revenue that the municipality will collect, but again, it's just sharing that revenue collection in a different way and increasing the amount that's coming from the utility class properties. With regards to the water and sewer budgets, consultation took place with all 7 water districts and with the Snug Cove Sewer District. We held meetings with each of the local advisory committees. And all of the budgets were approved by the local service areas, and they have all been included and consolidated into this 5-year plan. We do have a late-breaking development to report. We did receive notification from the Federal Department of Heritage and Culture that the municipal application for the community center grant was not successful. So we have made an adjustment to the budget here. We have adjusted it to reflect an increase in donation revenue to make up for that grant funding that we were hoping for of $732. So that donation line item has been increased to fill that gap. Now, for now, we're hopeful that the fundraising campaign will be successful. At the event it's not, we will return in the fall with a recommendation. We would probably be recommending that council consider accessing the 2.287 growing community funds to help make up that shortfall. Other potential options could include additional borrowing. At this point, we will put all available options on the table come the fall in order to make up that funding shortfall, if there is one. Other taxing jurisdictions. So as part of our annual taxation process, we are required to establish tax rates for both Metro Vancouver and Islands Trust based on our assessed values. So the Metro Vancouver requisition this year was $206,622. It's an increase over last year by about 5%. They requisitioned us for $196,215. And the Islands Trust requisition this year is $345,989, and that's gone up by about 6.8% over last year's requisition of $323,769. So where we are in the financial plan development process here at April 24th, at the council meeting, staff are recommending that council give 3 readings of the financial plan and the tax rate bylaw, and moving that forward then for a 4th and final reading and adoption at the May 8th council meeting, which will be in time for the May 15th statutory deadline to approve a financial plan and tax rate bylaw. And all of the information has been updated on our webpage. We have a 50-page financial plan booklet that has been uploaded there. So all of that information is accessible to the public on the website, all of the changes and the most recent information. And that's it.
Thank you. Any questions on financial plan? Starting with Councillor Morris.
Can you go back to the slide near the beginning where you said you had a 4.1% and you were talking about salaries? I think it was maybe.
This?
Yeah. So how much is the actual COLA percentage increase that everybody's, except for the union contract people, would be getting?
I'm sorry, I didn't break that out from the
Well,
grid.
we give everybody all across the board the same percentage increase in pay. So how much is that going to be?
It's a 4%.
4%? Flat?
Yeah, and then there's a little bit extra that is an adjustment for people who are progressing through the grid. We have a 4-step salary grid. And that is approved by policy. I lumped them together. I may have published another document where I broke it out, but in this slideshow.
Well, I just think because our new policy says as approved by council, but through the budget process, that we need to be very clear as to what the COLA amount is.
I believe it is 4%.
It's 4%.
The majority of our staff are at the top of their grid progression, and so there is some movement through the grid, but not very much, so hence the 0.1.
So everybody will get 4%, except for the union contract.
Correct.
Yeah.
Which has to be negotiated still.
Bargaining has not begun, but it's
imminent.
Keep saying it is.
So maybe we could have the minutes reflect that the budget included a COLA of 4% for non-unionized staff. And then there's a trail.
Look to the corporate officer to record that.
Sorry, just note that byline.
The budget includes a 4% COLA increase for the non-union staff.
First.
Thank you. And thank you for the clear report where we can really see all the different steps that we've taken. As much as the amounts seem enormous to me, I think we've been through a careful process, and thank you for that. I'm sorry to hear about the grant. But you got to accept that sometimes we don't get grants. And I'm in favor of the resolutions and the work we've done on the budget so far, including the additional 1% for the asset management part, which I think is so important in this time of big changes. So unless anybody's got, I'm prepared to move the motion.
Any other discussion first? Councillor Wake?
I was just going to second.
Okay, so moved by Councillor Fast, seconded by Councillor Wake.
Do you want me to read it out so that
Yes, please.
Alex can, and that's Bowen Island Municipality 5-year financial plan bylaw number 604, 2023 be read a first, second, and third time, and that Bowen Island Municipality annual tax rates bylaw number 605, 2023 be read a first, second, and third time.
All right, so moved by Councillor Fast, seconded by Councillor Wake. Any discussion on the motion?
I just had one more question.
Yes.
Which I think, just for clarification for the public, the donation revenue line, is that all donations related to the community center?
The majority is. Some of it is confirmed. There's $1 million being held at the Community Foundation on behalf of the Community Center project. And then the 1.6 balance is the target, the fundraising target.
Usually donations you don't budget for because they're.
No, but we do have that knowledge.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Seeing no further discussion, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye. Aye.
Currently,
And that carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Watson. We've postponed all of section 8, no correspondence.
Yeah, there is.
Where's correspondence?
So just that late item from Graham Ritchie, Snowcone House, regarding the letters.
Okay. So without having that letter immediately in front of me, is there a specific request out of that?
No. I went back to him with an email and said, can you give us a little more detail as to just what it is you're asking for? So they're going to the Minister of Housing, Ravi Kaplan, to ask for about $2 million to help them complete the construction of Snug Cove House. So,
In the way of a loan?
no,
Oh, for grant.
so I can quickly find, well, I can find the, here we go. Let me find Andy Williams. Extra funding is what we need from the minister. We're hoping there may be some flexible funding that could help us reduce our funding deficit. As the minister wants to be assured that all levels of government are supportive, a letter from BIM Council would be very helpful. They already have a $12 million loan, it sounds like, from BC Housing. Grant.
Okay, so maybe we'll do this way for the sake of expediency. Does anyone have an objection to sending a letter of support on behalf of council for the Snug Cove House project?
I was just going to move that the council send a letter to the Minister of Housing in support of us having a Snug Cove House and retirement facility for our seniors on the island.
So moved by Councillor Morse. Is there a seconder for that one?
Currently,
I'll second.
Sure, Councillor Jurgensen. Just for clarity, I'd ask the corporate officer to read out the motion again.
Sorry, so I had that the council provided a letter in support of the Snug House application to BC Housing.
No, that's to the ministry.
To the
Minister of Housing.
To the minister.
Okay. So the council provide a letter in support of Snug Cove House, the Snug Cove House application to the Minister of Housing. It's been moved and seconded. Yes, Councillor Past.
The way it reads right now says the application and
What request?
yeah, I think it needs to be request or request for additional funds or something. Thank you.
So the motion without objection reads that council provide a letter in support of the Snug Cove House request for additional funds to the Minister of Housing. Any further discussion on this motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
It's some nice wording in his letter, but
And that carries unanimously. Item 11, new business, Metro Vancouver business, I hope at this point is fairly self-explanatory.
nothing exciting on the meeting coming up this Friday?
No, the meeting this Friday is actually very quiet, so
Knock on wood when you say that.
knock on wood. And my hope ultimately with having passed the first reading of this rezoning and the OCP amendment, and given the time that we now have with the resolution provided for Metro Vancouver on Friday, is that we can get a whole lot more thoughtful and collaborative with this process moving forward, and that we can do our utmost to bring the community along with us. 11.2 on TransLink business, there was a budget workshop, joint budget workshop between the Mayor's Council and the board, which is ultimately in service of trying to get at how to fund and draw up the investment plan for TransLink's ambitious services in the next little bit. I did have an encouraging conversation with one of their staff there who caught the resolution from Metro Vancouver as it just went out, and particularly as much news from one meeting went to the other meeting, and that compared it to, that the opportunity now exists because a stake in the ground has been put in the ground with this project, that TransLink's now in the position and the onus is on them to help create transit opportunities to the other side of the island, which I found very encouraging. Item 11.3, update to Council of Islands Trust business. Perhaps I'll look at Councillor Giddy first for an update.
I don't have anything to report. the governance committee meeting and we've discussed formal and informal meetings, but I think I reported on that earlier.
Fast.
Nothing to report on Islands Trust, but just a quick word on Howe Sound Community Forum. A number of us went on Friday, and I sort of caught them up to date with what's happening on Bowen for the past year, and anybody who's interested can let me know and I'll forward you the email via that. But otherwise, it was a great meeting, and we met on the water taxi and met our colleagues from around Howe Sound. It's a nice collaborative atmosphere. I report.
I'm very disappointed to have missed that. Seeing no further updates, down to question period. Anybody online who wishes to ask a question? Nobody in the audience for any of the diehards who are still on
live stream.
On the live stream here. No questions. With that, I will look for a motion to adjourn. Moved by Council Fast, seconded by Council Wake. Any discussion? All in favor, raise your hand, say aye. Aye. Unanimously. Thank you, Council, for a long meeting. We are now